Hoi no, ko karanga mai hoki te te, ko riri hoki tātou. Te tīmata mai anō hoki tō tātou hui. O tēnei rōpū, te kauni hero te mataua Maori. No rere kāre kore me mihi atu ki kaut. Me ngā kano hi hau, ngā me ma hau ko tāi mai tunu kui ki rungu ki tēnei kaupapa. A i roto ki tēnei rōpū, ngā mihi anō hoki ki kaut. Ka whakawā te mai nei koutou marae maha o tēnei rā. Ke tipu mai anō hui ngā pūki ngā mahi roto i tēnā me tēnā o koutou. Hei āpina tanga hoki moto tātou iwi whānui. E roto ki te rohe o te matau o Maui. No te tu wheneki ke te mihi atu. Ke koe hinu ai, kāre kore a koe hoki te heumana hau mo te tātou. Mo te kauni hera nei, whānui, me mihi whatika. Me te mea mōhea nei ki te o tātou kai whakahaere. Te rangatira James, kāre kore ka haere tunu a mihi e whakaporopore aki anei hoki ki a koe. Mori mai o ngā karakia me ngā mihi hori e rauna hoki te tēpune. Reira, ke te mihi anō ki kia kōreta. Pai te ki te nei te nui ngō tō tātou tō tātou pōri tēnei wā, ko rahi i noi ho naine ngā tāngata, kei rot. Me ngā whānau kei muri nei eno hoana, e tahi kei runga e tahi o ngā komiti ko ka whaiti, ka wā tēnei huki, a tō mātou kauni hera. He kai kōrero ki tēnā o te rohe o te mataua Māori. No re me mihi anō ki kia kaut, te rangi hau koutou ma. No reira me ino hoki tātou, e ki tō tātou karakia. Tēnei atu. Te tīmata pai hoki, e pai tunu tātou e tuki te rongo pai, a me te rangi Māori. No reira te māngai mi ngāna hera pona te tauka turu tapu. E tatu mai nei koutou ki wāhi nui tēnei whakamoimi te o mātou. Hei tātari katoa ki ngā kupu e whakapua ke nei mātou, e roto ki tō koutou kroriatanga. Ko koutou nei hoki te tīmatanga me te whakaotinga, mai o mātou e tūmana ko tēnei roto ki tō koutou kroriatanga. Ko koe ana hoki te māngai hei tō tuko mai, ai e nei, kenei, te māngai me ngā ana hera pona te toka turu tapu. Whakaungi o mai nei mātou ki roto ki te arohanoa, mā koutou ki a pina mai hoki tō tātou hui, mo te tīmatatanga o tēnei tau hau, rua mana rua te kau mātoru. O te rā ki noho pai tonu tā te roto ki ngā rangi Māria, me te whakapono. Ki huri pai ngā kōrero ki tukunātu ki tō tātou iwi kai waho ke, e mōhea nei hau ki te take, o haere he hoki tēnei hui te rāne. Nō re, te mangi ngāna hera pona te toko turu tapu. Whakaungi o mai tonu mātou ki roto ki te arohanoa, pai here tia tonu mātou. Kei roto ki te rangi Māori ngā wā katoa, ko koe ana hoki te māngai hei tau tuko mai, ai nei, ākanei, ai. O tīmata mai ngā mihi nai nei?
Ai,
Mo James. I just been alluded to the fact that after the karaki we were going to give our poroporaki to James, knowing that he's leaving the council. So, in so doing, James, I can remember when you first came here, and we had that big gathering at Waipati to welcome you here. No doubt your mahi has been humongous, it's been large. And but we've all persevered with it, and up to where we are now, and I can see the growth in the committee now. The membership is really growing out of proportions, which is a good thing. And it's good for us as Māori, and it's good for us as Pākehā. So there's no real qualms about how I'm giving you my poroporaki, but through your being here as our CEO, I think that created this situation that we're in today. We can only get better and better now. And for the years that I've sat here, with in the years, almost over 20 years, I have all my picking up and down, but you still come back. But today, it's your farewell from us. So, Heidi Pai, when you finish, travel safe, whatever the positions you take up, that you've already made up your mind to do. We wish you all the best in those ventures, and hopefully you don't stay away too long. Come and visit us again, stay with us. Even if you come back to say, well, listen. Koina hoki taka. That's my little short spiel to wish you all the best and your family. Tēnā koe, tēnā koe. Ori no tēnā tātou katoa.
That's wairo. So tēnei ki mihi atu ki a koe te pāpā. Nā hui tō mai te whānui tango te kauwairunga. Hei whare āhuru mō wai, hei tōka tū mōna, hei tauranga waka mā tātou te rānei. O tira ki ngā waha kōrero, o tēnā taiwhenua, tēnā taiwhenua roto mai o ngā tika haunu. O tira ki a koutou ngā mema o te kaini hera, ki a koe te hiamana. Ki a tātou katoa, watae mai nei, watatsu mai nei, i ngā te karanga o te kaupapa tēnei te mihi atu. Hoi anō, wahau tētahi o ngā te hunga tauhau, ki roto i te rūma nei. O tira, orongo au i ngā pukenga, mōhau, James. So on behalf of of Wairoa, I have been privy to your presentations. I've been one of those ones impressed by what you've said and what you've given, and I have heard all those good things pertaining to your ability and to your work. So on behalf of Wairoa, I'd like to farewell you, but also congratulate you on your new role, and all that I have heard about you supports the fact that you've gotten that new role. Supports, speaks to your ability and to your knowledge in this area. So on behalf of Wairoa, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to farewell you and congratulate you. Well, tēnei te mihi atu ki a tātou.
Are you ready? Mauri ora tātou, nā reira e tuake nei, i raro tamaru tō tātou, matu te rangi e mihi kawana, e mihi mai o hā ki a koutou ki a tātou i tēnei wā. Tēnā koe he te pāpai te rangatira, mō tō whakamuimiti ki tō tātou matu te rangi. Nā reira, e te kai whakahaere matua, o tēnei kauni hera a rohe o te mataua Maori. A ka nui te mihi ki a koe, James. Kei te tino ko, ki te tūtaki, ki te mahitahi, tāua, tātou nei, i tēnei wā, me ngā rā. Me ngā rā, ko tai mai koe, i wainganui i a mātou i a tātou. Nā reira, James, ka nui te mihi, ka nui te aroha ki au koe, mō tō mahi hau, i roto nei te kāwanatanga. Nā reira, me tō whānau hoki, mā te atua, koutou e manaki, e tiaki. My colleague over here, Peter, would like to say a few words also. Kia ora, Peter.
Kia ora, James. I suppose just on behalf of Te Whanganui o Rotu, just want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work you put in. Obviously, I think at the same time you come on board, me and Api may come on board for Te Whanganui o Rotu. And yeah, it's been a period of change for all our tai whenua throughout the East Coast, and it was good to work alongside you. And I suppose when I look at milestones that have been reached, and I look at Māori wards, obviously, I remember a few of us walking around protesting about Māori wards, and it was great that the Hawke's Bay Regional Council in your time that supported Māori wards, and I know we've got some of our representatives sitting here today. So that was just a huge change and representation for our whānau. So I just want to congratulate you and taking through that transition period. Obviously, we've got to do some work, like the council, but Hawke's Bay Regional Council, one of the leaders of the Hastings District Council, leading that. So a big mihi to you, I think, in your new role, great role. We'll no doubt see you on your hikoi as you start engaging with iwi on that journey. But just want to wish you well and say I've enjoyed the time, or I think we've all enjoyed the time with you and your leadership that you've demonstrated. And we always say if you lead by example, it's a good thing. So all the best on your new career and journey, and acknowledge the mahi you do. And, you know, we generally don't say those words lightly, but we credit's due, we give credit. So ngā mihi. Thanks, James.
Tēnā tātou, te Maori Committee, o te matau a rohe, o te matau a Maori. Kia o pe Hami, o awhi o te ao, o te committee, kia ora, tēnā koe, tēnā koe. Ngā chairmans, hene wai, fabulous to see you there, babe. James, you're on your way. Give him Pierre the hat, and then our past chair, Mikara, and our other, and the chair of the moment, Mike, and our lady that's not here, Michelle, mihi mai. To all those people I've just mentioned, it's like a big handshake. But to you, James, I'm inspired by a fellow like you, and I know wherever you go to, you be the man. Your presentation and the changes that I've seen in the short time that I've been on this Māori Committee are huge. And I speak from a guy that went away from New Zealand and came back 27 years later and witnessed what I left. If I go to Porangahau, nothing changed. But when I step out of Porangahau, everything's changed. And now we're in a time of massive change where we're trying to create a partnership between Māori and Pākehā as such. And for me, you've had a huge influence on that. And I thank you on behalf of the Tamate Tai Whenua, because I've seen their growth in there as a result of things that have happened here and taken back by Roger and all the other representatives that have sat in this seat. When some of us can't make it, someone else comes, but they take back all the things that you've brought to this table. And I just want to lastly say, for me, when you do a presentation, James, for a fellow like me, I can sit and understand it from start to finish. That's the quality of the service you've brought to us and to this table, and that I speak pretty broadly. I wish you well. And I was listening to a conversation you were having with Pierre the other day at the governance meeting, and they're on to you down there, and I'm excited about that as well. So all the best from us, all the best from Tamate. I'm sad Roger's not here today, but I'm glad I get to say something to you. All the best, James, for you and your family. Kia ora. I know you won't forget us. They won't let you. But Wellington is better off by having a guy that we trained and sent down.
Kei te tautoko te wā ki te kaikara ki te ata nei te matua Hami. Hoi anō me ki I runga te kaupapa kaimui I a tātou I te wā nei. Ara me kia poro ake kia koe James. Hoi anō. You know, we go through some really testing times, both in terms of relationships and behaviour. because the mahi is so huge in front of us. And having to bring together, you know, our te ao Māori world, I guess, in its relationship as a treaty partner, to in that interface in Tāwanatanga. And it's very, very testing at times. And of course, in amongst all that testing, you get the expressions and colour of various people throughout the whole of this Hawke's Bay region. You know, there's this prophetic saying that up in Wairo, ho pipi ho ninge ninge mātangi rau. You know, and it was a descriptor that said that from the kaumātua, Uncle Wee and Uncle Ozzy, you know, using and picturing in your mind's eye here, as one starts to meander their way down the Wairo River, and they struck up a little bit of turbulence, and then that turbulence gets to, you know, ho pupu, ho ninge ninge, and then this flattening out, mātangi rau. And of course, that befits the nature, the āhuatanga of its people. And of course, when you come down to Heretaunga, you know, of course, for every twist and turn, araro, there's a council-in-chief. So what does that tell you? You know, there's got a lot of consultation for every council-in-chief. We've got a lot of colourful people in Heretaunga, no doubt throughout the extent of the whole of the Hawke's Bay region. But it just seems to have come out at a time when you arrived, James, and as our kaumātua, and you took the brunt of it, because, you know, I stand here to say that I've at least gone through 4 GMs, CEOs, throughout my term, and it hasn't come easy. And, you know, just when you think, like staff, when we get to interface and we're poles apart and we're at least trying to make way towards each other, Godfather, people leave, you know, and you've got to start again. So I think that, you know, whole change that we've seen, particularly in the political landscape, that's just happening, that's still going on, and it's throwing up all of this dust in terms of how things are going to land in an overall relationship with each other. And while we've got a very significant, if you ever looked at a time and, you know, defining moment in terms of the representation that's come within this particular council, first and foremost by Mike and others when we were pushing for more capacity inside of the regional council, because good old Viv Mole back in the day, you know, he was only on a 0.5, and that's all we had was Viv Mole, and he's great too as well. And of course, by the time we got as part of this 10-year plan and our moi to say, come on, we've got to have internal support to start, particularly as you would all say, hey, I need to understand better te ao Māori, and of course cultural competency. And I just want to remind ourselves that this is why this role was created, with the push, and of course with those, and I've got to acknowledge Rex as our previous chairperson, and he was one of those wanting a catalyst of change. And as we came from a really huge debacle, which was the Ruataniwha, you know, PC 509 or whatever, you came into that. And with us having to welcome you over at Waipatu, we welcomed you there. You know, it was Ngāhiwi that wanted to create this shoulder to shoulder, and rather than going toe to toe with each other, shoulder to shoulder. And I think that's part of the āhuatanga that we have here in Ngāti Kahunguni. You know, if you're over in on the Wanganui River, ko te awa ko, we have our own manaki ki te tangata. No matter how difficult it is, and amongst the mahi, the work, and that interface, we've got to strive, ake, to just confront, twist, grapple, and whatever the outcome, emerge a better people. So on behalf of Heretaunga, you know, I can probably hear the voices now. You know, we've been the most antagonistic submitter at hearings, because we are so impassioned about the relationship that we have with our environment, our connectedness and relationship of our awa to our people. You know, ko au te whenua, ko te whenua ko au. And so, James, I think you've been able to, I hope, in this term that you've had with us, see the expression that's from Ngāti Kahunguni, and agree with Paula. We've put you in a very good state of having to learn through all of this. I'm hoping that you're able to at least take, a kete full of rauimi, resources, in terms of how a relationship be given effect. And I mean, there'll be only a few of us, I've got to be honest here, that'll be going, oh, really? We acknowledge, some of us will acknowledge both, one, the journey that you've taken within this regional council, the testing times that you've had to confront, because let's face it, whānau, at times, the struggles of the conversation I get to take home, and this is naughty, and it has an influence on our lives. And I know that you have worked long hours, as most of us will attest, that I think 2022 back has to stay back there. That 2023 has to show and demonstrate a different dynamic. Less is best, because we overload ourselves with a lot of complexity, folks. And to be honest, with all that complexity, it's been driven by a machine. And I guess at best, what we try to do is try and seek that balance. So, my friend, I hope that you've struck that balance. I hope that in your quest and in your travels that you are taking from Ngāti Kahungunu Tata Katoa. Our aroha, our expressions of appreciation. So tēnei te mi atu, tēnā koe, tēnā tata katoa.
Paula. He's already spoken for us. I'm going to go newest member, newest representative.
Ai, tēnā koe whaen, nāu nei te rākau, e te rangatira.
Kia ora tātou, ka tahi anō mātou māo ka taku hoa rangatira, ka tau mai nei ki Hawaii ki nui, Hawaii ki roa, Hawaii ki pāmama. Nō reira, ko whakapāho atu nei mai Hawaii, the North Shore of Hawaii, I konei ki te atu ai I tā māua nei mokopuna tuatahi. Nō reira, mihi nei kia koutou I te kāinga I tēnei wā, me taku mihi ki a koe, James, koe ke nei ki tō wiki whakamutunga, hei kai autu mo te kauni hera arohe o te matawa Maui, nō reira, ka nui te mihi ki a koe. Ka nui te mihi ki a koe I o mahi kua tutuki nei I a koe e noho nei hei tumu whakarai mo te kauni hera, o Pukenga, o Pumanawa, o Whiako, kua uru mai ki roti ngā mahi I Wainganui a mātou a Ngāti Kahungunu. Anō reira, kai ka nui te mihi ki a koe, tira kia koutou te kaunihira. We just touched down not long ago in Hawaii, and we're here seeing our mokopuna. And so kia ora, te hangara o tēnei rā, o tēnei ao noho nei tātou, that allows me to zoom into the hui today. But I just caught the halfway through probably the end part of Māore's kōrero, which he talked about our different, our relationship with the pūtai ao o Ngāti Kahungunu, te awa, ko mātou, ko ngā awa katoa. But we wish you well, James. But acknowledging that you have a role, an important role, kei te whakapū o Pōneke, and that the relationship will continue, albeit in a different role for yourself. But in terms of our aspiration, kei te tautoko I tā Maori kōrero, 2023 and beyond is where our thinking is, where our thinking needs to be. We have some major, issues, take, pūtake, kaupapa in front of us. We've just been reminded how real climate change is with everything that went on in Tāmaki Makaurau. But certainly for our small community in Waimarama, back in 2011, we got the wake-up call back then. He big mahi, he piki mahi mā tātou, hei kōkiri mā tātou, hei tēnei wā, mo te oranga tunutanga o te hapuri te take, for the betterment of our people. So, ko te pūtai ao, is we need to check in te pūtai ao. At the end of the day, it's for our people, te tangata te kaupapa. And so, I just want to acknowledge all the mahi that you've done here amongst us, James. Ka reo mo te whakaroa ki ngā kōrero, ka rei kore, kua kōrero tia ngā kōrero, kua mihi ngā mihi. Nō reira kau tēnei, mihi nei kia koe, James. I tō mahi hau, kia kā, kia mai, kia manawa nui, kia tutuki pai ai, i tā o tātou nei tupuna mātua i wawata ai. Nō reira, huri noa, tēnā koutou, tēnā hui tātou.
We'll go with young Mike first.
Tēnā no koe te rangatira te matua, e timatana tō tātou hui I te karakia, me te mihi kia rātou, ngā chairmana, a Baden, rau ko hina wai I te ata nei, tautoko. Engari taku kitingi ia kōrua, ko mārei kauhoki aku whakaro, ki e rātu member o te committee te timatana, ne, rātou kua haere ki te, haere atu ki te pō. Nō reira pai no ki te mihi ki a rātou. Ko kāre rātou ko tai tinana, kāre kore ko tai wairua ki. Nō reira koutou ngā itua huhua, haere atu koutou ki rungi tō mātou aropa. I hate speaking after Mare because he usually takes everything I said. Just over 20 years ago, I came back from a decade working to the Ministry of Conservation in Wellington and just sort of settling into my house again in Central Hawke's Bay. The phone goes. It was a kuia from Takapau, Ata Allen. And she said, hey boy, what are you doing tomorrow? Why? Oh, there's a bit of a meeting down there. We want a representative for Tamatea. Oh, I'm very busy. No, I want you to go. So, ko tai maia. And Heicha Hiha was the chair of the time. And as I said in my opening of my mihi, there was many that served on this committee. And ki ana te kōrero o ngai tāua, kāre te tanata kahari ki mua, me nā kāre te tanata ka tichiro ki muri. We cannot go forward unless we move back. And in those days, as it is today, this committee is an advisory committee. But the advisory committee of those times to this time is mile wide. Also, 3 or 4 years after that, the chief who Tuheitia stood down, and Viv Mole, who we know well, said, Mike, you should be the next chair. I'm too busy. So next minute, you're the chair. And so I had just over a decade of that, being the chair, and it was a huge privilege. And I remember saying to, I'm having a kaumātua block here, our last chair of the kaumātua, of the... the tūranga, Tamona, and what was it more today? Ngahiwi, sorry.
Yeah, who was he?
I played football against him for 10 years, and now I've forgotten his name. It's cool when you get a brain injury. Anyway, you had all those standing committees, and I said, Ngahiwi, you need somebody from Kahungunu to sit on those committees. And he said, oh no, bro, we got you. And so went to the CEO of the time and said, hey, all these committees that, I'm sitting on, do I get paid? He said, oh, no, you're just an advisory. So just before you go, could you sign the checks for all those things? And it has certainly changed over, 25 odd years. And I remember once sitting there with the councillors, as the chairman, I was able to sit with all the councillors. You can sit there, you can have the odd say, but you can't vote on anything. So it was a presentation of the 10-year plan, and it was a big book like that, beautiful. And at that stage, each section
had a heading in Maori, and it was really nice to see it, just starting to creep in. So the councillors went around the table to say, what did you think of that? Oh, very nice, very nice. Got around, and he won't mind me mentioning his name, came to Alan Dick. Alan, former mayor of Napier, former chairman of this council, what did you think? I couldn't understand it. Why was that, said the chairman of the day. Well, all this Rayo stuff. And they said, oh, and a couple of councillors stood up and wanted to bash him and all that. And then it came around to me, and I said, there's no point in attacking him. Oh, thank you very much. It's nice to see a bit of te reo. Alan said, the chairman said, Alan, would you like to finish off? Good. Tēnā koukou, tēnā koukou. Okay. Roll forward a bit, and we have somebody like James. A little boy, little honky-tonky from Havelock. What have we got here? And now I think he's nearly as good as a Maori. But his vision, and it was talked about at Waitangi this week, of co-governance. Pākehās do get frightened about it. Why is there so many Maoris and they've got so much to say? But it's working together, and I've seen James actually put this across. Early in his piece, you all know Tania Hopkins, who's a solicitor, and she bap, 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 bap. And so James says, Tania, what do you want? And she quite straight-facedly said, everything. So that sort of started a new chapter. Okay. But it's been wonderful to have you here, James, to have your ear privately up there and to say, look, we're not here to take over the country and drive the park out. We're here to work together. And you have been instrumental in that. And you're going back to Wellington, where you worked with the new Labour Party, with Anderton. It's not this, it's for you younger ones. There was a party called the New Labour, breakaway party, and James worked in Wellington on that. You're going there, and we congratulate you, because while we're sad you're leaving, you're going, and as I said to you by email, there's that Prime Minister spot just waiting for you. Kia ora no tātou.
I'll just follow on from young Mike. E taitoko nā mi kia koe, James, nā kōrero rangatire takatoa I runga te tipu, tēnei ata. Absolutely agree with everything that's been said here this morning. First and foremost, though, I'd like to give my apologies and best wishes from my co-chair, Michelle. Unfortunately, she was diverted to serve the people. And of course, as we all know, she's been recently elected as a director to Tātou Tātou, so she's been hoodwinked and dragged off into that forum today. Absolutely agree with everything she said. When I sum up your time as CEO, and I asked you the other day at the All Governance, what did you see as your success? If you were to sum up your time as CEO within the organisation, and you talked about the capacity that you put into the organisation, and that's absolutely true. The capacity and the capability, as Mare said, when Viv was here supporting this committee, it was a 0.5. Look where we are today. Look at the Maori employees that are working in support of our Māori issues, and around the partnership and forming the partnership and understanding of what our Māori communities, their views, their thoughts, and their aspirations, and how do we bring substance to all of that. And you've done that. You've done that. I can remember when we pushed to move from Viv to Joyce Ann, the conversation we had there, and you came to the table, because when you employed Joyce Ann, you get, well, you've got what you wanted. We went, actually, no, that's not what we wanted, James, but we'll keep her. But we were actually wanting a senior management in regards to supporting the work of council in regards to working with Māori. And of course, the journey started with Pere, and then we've continued to build upon that. And so for me, what you've done is you've lifted the bar. You lifted the bar for this organisation, and that's flowed on into this committee. As Mike said, the difference of where the Māori Advisory Committee was 20 odd years ago to where it is today, chalk and cheese, because that's just about growth. And you've contributed hugely to that growth. It's been a pleasure to be co-chair during your term. And as Mike said, all those conversations that you have away from the table and seeking our advice, whether you want it or not, we're going to give it at times. And sometimes not always what you wanted to hear, but at least you were prepared to hear it. And that's all anybody can ask for. We do wish you well. You do take on a huge role within the Ministry of Environment as CEO. We really look forward to that. And Marty is right. We have contributed to your growth that you're going to take to Pōneke into that role. I look forward to watching your journey in there and being able to say, we did that. That's us coming through James. Just on behalf of the committee, those present and past, we wish you all of the best. Thank you for what you've done for this organisation. And that gentleman just walking through the door sums it all up. In regards to the position, who would have guessed that we would have seen Māori values being central to this organisation? But that just talks about our journey over the last 6 or so years. James, once again, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you. It'll be a pleasure working with you in the future as well. As someone said, don't be a stranger. You know where we are. And now that you're no longer on our CEO, perhaps we can engage you as an advisor to our committee on our behalf. We want to do, or you want to wait for James to do our waiata?
Oh, otherwise he'll have to do his waiata by himself. I will do it after James.
Yeah. Okay.
Tēnā koutou rangatira mā, ngā mihi nui.
James.
Mātua, kia karakere, kia uparaki, ngā mihi o te ata. It's quite humbling, in fact it's deeply humbling to have these very kind words from you all, given the enormous contributions and public service that sits around this table, which cumulatively and individually far surpasses anything I've been able to achieve in my relatively short career. So I have been incredibly privileged to have the opportunity to be in this role and to work with this committee and to work with me or most of you individually on so many issues over what's actually quite a short space of time. And I do remember very fondly my pohere at Waipatu and the challenge that was thrown down by Ngāhi Iwi to create a Māori capability and capacity for resource management, both within council and outside. And that's still a work in progress. And we've got exciting opportunities just around the corner around that. And we've certainly built capability within this organisation, which just took another step, obviously, with Te Kaha joining us, rejoining us in the Mātauranga role, but with others such as Tarangiho, Jack joining us just so recently, joining Anthony and Nathan as well, all under the leadership of Peri, who I just want to acknowledge publicly in front of you all, has been the po in which I've been able to lean and stand, and has been a towering strength for me.
You made a good choice.
You made a very good choice. I got lucky, very lucky, and I feel really comfortable about handing the reins over to Pierre for now to look after this ship. The ship, I think, is in good heart. We've got a long way to go. We've got a long way to go on partnership. We've got a long way to go in terms of truly upholding rangatiratanga. We've got a long way to go on to tile on the restoration, the protection of the region's environment. But I think we've got a really good foundation that's been built over my time. And acknowledge Viv and the work of this committee over the 20 odd years. I didn't start with a blank sheet. Actually, I started with a whole bunch of hard mahi, and so I've been able to build on that. And I've got no doubt that the next Te Tumu Whakarai will take it to the next level and build on that legacy in partnership with this committee. And so my request to you is that you welcome and support the new leader of this organisation in the same way that you have for me. I'm incredibly grateful for the tough conversations. I actually don't think you probably all appreciate the extent to which this has been a training experience for me. It's been a huge professional learning opportunity for me to understand the history of Te Matua Maori, to understand the relationship that the Crown and its agents has had with our mana whenua, how that's interacted with the changes in the region's, our waterways, our land, our forests, our fisheries, where we've come from, where we're at today, and what we now need to do together. I think there's so much power in Te Ao Māori around the expression of kaitiakitanga, anākitanga, whanaunatanga, kotahitanga. There's so much that we can draw upon that's unique to this whenua, it's deeply rooted in this place, that we can bring into the kaupapa of Te Kanihira Arohi o Te Matua Māori and build on for the future. And so this committee and our mātauranga is key to that. So our regional planning committee and our PSGs. So actually, I think this council is better placed, probably than any regional council in the country, to partner. It's complex and challenging with Ngāti Kahungunu. You know that, I know that. But in many respects, the challenge brings strength. And I'm kind of hopeful that this is as hard as it gets anywhere in the motu, but we'll find out. So if what I've learned here I can take to the national level and support partnership through the reform of the resource management system, everything we have to do, then your gifts to me, which I've taken my kete to Poneki, is going to enrich and actually, the nation more broadly as we build towards stronger partnership with our environment. Final thing, just to acknowledge, and it has been said around a changing climate. There is some urgency as we look at Tamatiki Makaurau the last week. It's a when, not if, for Te Matua Māori. We'll get our turn. I've been lucky on my watch that we haven't had too many big events, but they will come. And so there is urgency. There is urgency with the mahi of this committee and of this council. And so my plea to you as I guess I go out the door is that as we continue to advance partnership and we work through and face as we must the past around the Crown's relationship, this institution's relationship with mana whenua and with the whenua and what's been done, that we don't lose too much time getting on with moving forward on the mahi as we resolve the issues of the past. I'm heartened in the way this committee has worked that you can do both together. So I think that challenge is now yours, and it falls to Piri and to Hinawai and to all of you to work together at pace to make the hard decisions on behalf of our future generations and set this region on. So with that, once again, a sincere thank you for actually the kindness and support that I've had. I've had a lot of support for my mahi from this committee, which I haven't taken for granted, and I feel deeply privileged to have enjoyed. And that I'll take in my heart. Aroha has been given to me since I started in this role from Ngāti Kahungunu, and there's been generosity extended, and I'll carry that forevermore with me. So it's been a privilege to serve you all, and you're now in good hands, and I can go on my way knowing that I've done the one thing that I think everybody aspires to in a job like mine, and that's just leave the place better than when you found it. And in terms of partnership with our mana whenua, I think I'm leaving it in a place slightly better than where I found it. So, tēnā koutou. Tēnā
Tūtira mai mai iwi, tātou tātou e. Tūtira mai mai iwi, tātou tātou e. Pai a te maramatanga, me te aroha me ngā iwi. Kia tapatahi, kia potahi rā, tātou tātou e. Tūtira mai mai iwi, tātou tātou e. Toronga ti taha. Tūtira mai mai iwi, tātou tātou e. Whai a te maramatanga, me te aroha i ngā iwi, kia tapatahi, kia potahi rā, tātou tātou e. Au e tātou, tātou, pūriti a hia mau, hia we hi.
Tūturu whakamau a kia tīna.
Tīna!
Haumi e hui e.
Tāre ki e.
Kia ora tātou. We've got our running sheet in front of us. Nei tō tātou nei pākihi mahi tarangi nei. Engari i mua rā. Tui ai te rangi e tūhua nei, tui ai te papa e takotoki wahora i paparahi nei ai a tātou. Tui ai te hera tangata, nau nei tēnā e te pāpā, uncle. Nau nei whakarite a tātou i te rangi nei, me ki rā te whakatau mihi ki ena ngā kanohi hau. A putanu atu ki ena ngā tai whenua, Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated, he taunga keringo ki tēnei komiti Māori o tātou. E haere tonu ana mai tōna timatatanga i te tau iwi takau, tai hoki ki tēnei wā. Engari tā koutou nei ki, ai pai tēnā kia hoki whatu mai i muri rā, i ngā mahi ai a tātou. Engari, anga whakamua, tirohe o whakamua. Huena ki runga ki tēnā, e tai tinana mai, e tai matakanohi mai rā, e te rangatira e Baden. Ai, tēnei te mihi kia tātou katoa. Hoi anō, he timatatanga ma tātou, kei rungi ngā wāhi, ngā rarangi mahi i mua rā i a tātou. I've got the first, I've got agenda item on the running sheet, 1, 2, and then 3. And then I'm going to step back and ngā turu I muri rā, and allow, if we do get to the chair and the deputy chair, then I can sort of step back and kia waiho ki o koutou te kimiti Māori, kia mahi ai o koutou mai. So we'll just take any apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Roger, Maka.
Dr. Roger Marker, aye.
Councillor Williams.
Councillor Martin Williams, aye.
Karawaina.
Kararaina Kawana. Katarina, nera.
Oh, sorry, Katarina.
Katarina Kawana. Ira atu. Wonderful. Dr. Roger Marker, Councillor Martin Williams, Katarina Kawana. Can I have someone move the apologies be received, please? Kia ora, seconder. Tēnā koe tēnā koe paora. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, any abstentions? Ka pai kua mana. Conflict of interest declarations. Just moving around, do we have any conflict of interest declarations? I take it there are none. We've dealt with agenda item 2. So, Māori Committee Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson, I'll take you to the first agenda item paper, which is item 3. This one here relates to the appointment of the Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson by the Māori Committee. That this be elected at the first meeting of each triennium, which is this meeting here. So, haere mai ke rungu te whatituko te tau o tēnei te tau hau Pākehā nei. And also 2.2 is the Deputy Chair at the first meeting also. And if you look at item 3 or the paragraph 3 in there, it indicates that in past tikanga, the Māori Committee practice has been to anticipate this and to have had a he hui I mua rai te hui. So with that, I'd just like to, unless you have something to say, Mike, I'll call for nominations.
Yes, so just prior to calling for nominations, I took it to kōrero Pere in regards to the prior kōrero to the hui itself. So as representatives of each of our tai whenua, we had a discussion around this kōrero around the chair stroke deputy chair. As we know, last year we had a slight change to that where we had co-chairs. Ample number of reasons why there was co-chairs, but part of that also was opportunity to trial a different format. What it did give us, it gave us a representative from the north and from the south. It also gave us knowledge, local knowledge in those areas, which you may not always get if we just have a single chair. We've been lucky in the past with our previous chairs, either through the mātauranga or through their mahi, that gave them the reach right across the region. That will not always be the case. We can't guarantee that will be the case, and so we can't always guarantee that there will be that type of representation by having a single chair. So the general feeling from our discussions this morning was we were wanting to continue to have a co-chair representation. We understand there are implications with that further on in regards to other representation in further council committees and at council table, etc., etc., etc. But what we were wanting to do at this stage is explore the appetite of council to the supportiveness of supporting the aspirations of the representation of the Māori members of this committee, but also we also recognise that there are other matters that go into this overall decision. So with that, I'll pass that back to you, Peter.
Tēnā koe, Mike. What we might do, therefore, before we call for nominations, is see if there's any other discussion related to the proposition of co-chairs. Rather than go, pēnei te haere, te huri haere, nei, we might just take from anyone who's prepared to add to or complement the kōrero.
Yeah, I'll just enter the kōrero. And the pilot last year, we called it a pilot last year, it seemed to have worked well with 2 representatives. Obviously, they got a huge work task in front of them. Just the kōrero that come back from those 2 co-chairs, they said it worked well. So I mean, if something's working well and it's not broken, well, don't fix it. So, yeah, so we were from Te Whangarei-Orotu, we supported the kōrero that happened this morning about your representation and potentially, I suppose council would have seen benefit just with the contributions by our two co-chairs last year. I think they worked really hard along with the council, just want to acknowledge that. Nā mihi.
Nā koe, Peter. E kōrero anō tā koutou?
For me, Mr. Chairman, our co-chairs, our chairman and co-chair were quite different. And I thought that was quite beautiful. And I can't think of her name. Michelle. How Michelle presented at a meeting and how Mike presents at a meeting. And it just draws out of you quite a different duffy for the kaupapa. And that's what I saw was brilliant and loved about the co-chair being there. I might be a little bit spongy about how I see things here, but by and large, I'm in it. So I took all the co-chair.
Tēnā koe te pāpai e Paora.
Tēnā koutou. Just to acknowledge Matua Mike's kōrero around how fruitful it was last term in the Maori committee to have a wahine and a tāne. We heard about balance this morning, Matua Māori, and the representation to split the mahi, given how much mahi it ends up being for the Māori committee chairs and the RPC chairs, with our respective responsibilities to make sure that engagement and contribution to the council is reflected well through these voices. So I do tautoko the sentiment around co-chairs, and from a council perspective, we consider the recommendations that you provide us, and if co-chairs is the direction to continue to move on, we respect that and we will listen to that. In terms of our later conversations of representation from the Māori committee onwards, I think that's another further kōrero to have, but in terms of today's item around the idea of co-chairs, the fruitfulness of co-chairs, I'm very supportive of. Kia ora.
So the approach we might take to this, and I stand to be corrected, is that we might sort of seek a motion in terms of moving into the co-chair, kaupapa, and then we'll get the nominations as to who those might be for endorsement at a later date by our regional council. But the endorsement coming from here.
that direction, I'll second that.
Did you capture that? Moved over here by Mare and seconded by Paora. And this is that we move into receiving nominations for a co-chair's role. All those in favour say aye. 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 To the contrary or abstentions? Ka pai. Hey, kei te rongo tonu koe e Baden.
Ai, kei te rongo au.
Kia ora.
Pātai taku. Pātai taku, the RPC, are they co-chaired?
RPC, are they co-chairs?
So they are co-chairs. It's myself and Tanya.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay.
I think the only
Yeah,
distinction...
tautoko.
Ka pai, tēnā koe Baden. The only distinction there is that's legislated in terms of the co-chair roles. So ka pai, that's been received. Ko mana tēnā. I now call for nominations for co-chair.
I nominate Mike Paku.
And nā koe seconder.
Second that.
Oh, sorry, who was that?
And Api. Yep.
Tēnā koe api seconded. Mike Paku. Still open in terms of co-chair nominations? We can't say we have co-chairs at this point.
I would nominate Katara Vaina, but she's not here at the moment. She's not here today. And I think she was interested in the job.
So you can nominate. We just need to seek a seconder for that.
I would second that.
So Katarina Kawana, nominated by Api, seconded by Paora. We're in risk there of going into a voting process. Engari, kai te pai.
Are we in risk if we're looking at a co-chair option though? Because if we're looking at co-chairs, we wouldn't go to a voting process, would we?
If we receive more nominations.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So if someone was to close nominations, then that
Yep, I'll close the nomination. Oh, sorry, I won't close unless everyone's had it.
No, yeah, just wait for, are there any other nominations for the co-chair roles? We've still got a deputy chair role to nominate yet. No? Is there someone that will move a motion? Peter, you move
Yeah, I'll
that
move
nominations
motion.
closed.
Yep.
Have we ever seconded for that? Seconded by Mare. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Right, nominations are closed. So our co-chairs are duly elected for endorsement by Regional Council as Mike Paku, tēnā koe Mike, and Katarina Kawana.
O mai te pakipaki.
Deputy chair role. I'm hoping we don't move into co-deputy chair roles, but kia wai hawake kia koutou.
given the model we used at our last triennial, the fact that we had co-chairs, we were comfortable not to have a deputy chair with the ability for the co-chairs to go for each other. To co-ho.
Koi te pai tēnā?
Yep.
Okay, well, we won't move into the deputy chair one. Anything else we need to close off on that one, Leanne? Okay. Just before I step backwards,
Carry on.
No, I'm required to step back and hand over to the chair, the co-chair that's here.
Got it.
Tēnei e mihi kia koe rā Ngāti Kahunga, te whare o Ngāti Kahunga Iwi Incorporated. Ka e ta tuatahi ka umai ka rota ki tēnei komiti Maori o te kauni rāro hea ta matau a Māui. Hoi anō te mihi kia koe rā, e te heo mana, e ta rangatira e bai, me ki rā I tāu nei puari. Nā rātau I tono mai ko koe I tēnā e noho kirunga I tēnei tūranga. Nō reira, he roa wā, e ka area whakatunana mai a Ngāti Kahunga Iwi Incorporated kei roto ki tēnei komiti Māori. Nō reira, anei, hei, whakarangatira hi ai tēnei komiti Māori, ko u mai koe. Nō reira, kātai ka mihi. Me ki rā I tēnā rangatira, tēnei taniwha noho nei ki a tatau. Te kaumā waru tau. 18 years he spent in the chair was my understanding. Hey, just following. But whilst earlier on I talked about anga whakamua, tirohea whakamua, hey, moving that pace forward. It's always good to remember and to acknowledge from whence we have come. Tahu anō, anei rā tātou e mihi kia koe, mai te kauni hera, a me ki rā mai e nei ngā rangatira, e noho mai a tai whenua nei, mai a kahungunu nei, kei runga ki tēnei komiti Māori. Hoi anō, hoki muri au, nō reira, tēnā koutou āku rangatira, tēnā koutou, huri no tēnā tātou kia tuku atu kia koe rā e te heo mana.
Hera mai. Mai. He take tāku. Ia hei ana tunu tātou whiri. Mō ngā take kāle uri mai ke a Ngāti Kahunga Iwi Incorporated ki roto ki tēnei. No te mea, I konei tunu mata. I tahi o ngā mea mō te o Ngāti Kahunga. Tāua nei, me mare, noho mai mo te tai whenua hira taunga, a kua ki te kaua mata. No le hala hoki nā teori o taua wāra, te komite o taua wāra I te he. Ko tuku nātu ki toku nei poro aki ki Hemi, ki James. Mai tēnei tau, whakaanga mua hoki tātu. Waiho te au āhuatanga ki muri. E wāhanga hau anō ki tēnei, a moto tātou iwi o Ngāti Kahunga te kaua. No, le koene ke hoki tāku. Ke aroha mai anō hoki ki tērā komiti o te tātou iwi o Ngāti Kahunga. Kāre he take tāku, kei kone anō hoki ko tū mai ke e komiti anō hoki kei reira, mō tātou, engari e hara no tātou tunu taua hi. No te mea I mōhio nei hoki ta whakahaere tanga o tēnei komiti, o ngā tau o muara. Mo e nei katoa hoki tātau kai kone tunu te Māori e noho ana. Hei waha kōrero. Mo tēnā muka, hei te wairo, rongo mai wahi aere atu hi tamati. I kone tunu mātua ngā memo o te kauni he arohe mo te matau a Māori. No le koina hoki tāka. Ia hei pai anō hoki ngā ahotanga. Ke runga hoki tō tātou pōari. O te iwi o Ngāti Hauranga. Le kia ka hoki tātou. Kai kone ke anō hoki ki tēnei ngā kanohi hau. No me ma hau o te committee naine. Kei tōra ke te tangata. O piki kei taku ora. Nā mō he no hea. Kai kone tonu ngā rangatahi. I whai muri mai o tātou. Kei rātou ke ngā kura wai naine mā rātou ke ta. E kawe e mau. Nā le huri noa. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou. Kia ora ki tātou katoa.
Yeah, just when I stepped down as chair 4 or 5 years ago, James said to me, look, we want to make a bit of a presentation to you. And I said, look, it's a bit awkward because Tātumu has just asked me to be on the Regional Planning Committee. And I said, you give me something today and tomorrow the Regional Planning Committee, all the staff members saying, I thought we got rid of that fella. And I said to James, so what were you going to give me? And he said, oh, just a couple of bottles of wine. And so it might be an appropriate time to remind him. I need a couple of bottles of wine badly.
Tēnā koe, Mike. I'm sure they're on their way. Coming from Wellington, no doubt. He tika he timata tātou wahanga o te committee Māori. In line with our values of around, I think, tikana and koa. And for our whānau that are online watching at home, the purposes of today's hui is actually to put the mechanics, the structure around this committee together in order for it to do its work going forward. And part of our cultural requirements is that we have new board members who are present, who are part of this committee. So it's an opportunity for, if you like, that whanaungatanga to take place first, so that we all know who's sitting at the committee and they all have the opportunity to introduce themselves. So not only do we have new representation from Tai Whenua, but also from council. So it'll be good to, if you like, that we do that whanaungatanga first in line with our tikana and our koa values. So, tērā e tēnei wā, ka huri tarāka ki a koe Paura, e mihi kia. Kia ora koe e o.
Kia ora tātou. Ko waiwai tapu ahau. Reira, ko whakapanaki te mātua Māui a tiki a taranga toko Māui. Ko tō wairo hōpupu o ningi mātangi rau te awa. Ko tapu wai raua ko Tarauhina o ko tūpuna. Ko Tarauhina te whare nui. Ko te haio te whare kai. Ko ngā motu te whenua. Ko Ōkaka te wahi hoki. Ko te uri o te o te hapu. No reira, ko Ngāti Kahanunu te iwi. Ko Taki Tima te waka. No reira, ko Pōkari taku ingo. Kia ora tātai.
Did you want to?
Kia ora tātou, ko Pukeruru te maunga, ko Waingongoro, ko te tōtara ngā awa, ko Ngāti Whakaiti, ko Ngāti Kautere ngā hapu, ko Waitangi te marae, ko Taki Tumu te waka, ko Ngāti Kahungunu te iwi, kia ora ko ana te whaiti tuku noa.
Tēnā koe ana.
So Anna's father was one of those previous members of this committee, so we're now into the second generation. The issues are still the same though.
I'm not the issue, by the way.
Well, did you want to?
Tēnā koutou e hoa mā kua hui mai nei e tēnā pō. E tipo ahau e raro e te moanga o hori hori. E tipo ahau e te taha o te awa o Mahara Kiki. Ko whaui tuku ingoa whānau no takapau rātou. Ki whātuma, whātuma ahau i noho ana, ko Will Foley tuku ingoa.
Nā koe ora.
Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora.
Ora well. Aidan.
Kia ora tātou ko te whanganui ātara tōku maunga, ko wai ngongoro te awa, ko wai marama te marae, ko taupunga te whare, ko Ngāti Kurukuru tōku hapu, ko Baden Baba tōku ingoa, hea mana o Ngāti Kahungunu iwi, and grateful to the council or the Maori committee for making available a seat for Ngāti Kahungunu iwi Incorporated to be on the committee, and looking forward to working with you all and on the mini kaupapa for the betterment of our community. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Baden.
Hoi anō tēnā tātou ko hina ringa tōku ingoa. Ko mamau kai te maunga, ko nungaka te awa, tākitimu te waka, ko Ngāti rā kai pāka te iwi. Ko ngā whare rau te tahinga tēnei mihi atu ana ki a tātou. Kia ora tātou.
Charlie, since you've had to change your hat, did you want to recognise your hat?
Still change. Kia ora tātou, ko whakapūnake, ko maunga hareru, ko panikiri o ko maunga. Nō reira, he uri ahau no Ngāti Ruapani, Ngāti Pāhauera, Ngāti Kaungunu hoki. Nā mihi ono ki a tātou. Tuatahi na mihi a koe te tiamana. Ai te pai hoki ki te a koe e mau ana i tērā tūranga. Ka te aroa hoki ki tō hua hoa o mua, ko Michelle. Ki oi ka haere e ki tō ahi pai mōna. Te miha no ki a Katarina. Kare i toa i o mua ka noho au he memo o tēnei committee.
Ai.
I te tawa Mike Mārei. Tāmi o. Nā wairo i tono ate ki aia ki tōna tūranga he tia manu o mātai. Ko māua ko Paleta, wairau. Tātou be tētahi o mai Kaununi Executive. Pēnei a koe pō, nau mai hara mai ki te tēpū nei. Ka te pai hoki ki te Ngāti Kahu, i runga te tēpū. Nō reira tātou, he te uranga hau tēnei, he oi. He kānui, anō tēnei ki tēnei tēpū. Nō reira, nā mihi anō ki a tātou. Kia ora.
Hene wai?
Ko hine wai tonu ahau. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou. Ai noko nei ahau. Ko Ngāti Kahungunu ngai tahu ngā iwi, ko tākitimu te waka. He maha ngā marae i konei, engari ai tēnei te mihi kia koutou. He pōtai anō tēnei, engari ai koe te tangata tonu i tū mai. Kia ora.
So just for our, Hene Wai was a member, but now, as we know, she's also the chair of the regional council. So she's continuing a long tradition of our regional chair being a member of this committee. I think we've always recognised the importance that the regional chair is a member of this committee. rangatira ki te rangatira.
And it's a pleasure.
Just through you, Chair, can we just make a note in our minutes to reserve an opportunity for Martin Williams?
Yes.
At the next meeting, I think on 3 May.
Yes, sure. Thank you for that. So thank you, everybody. As you can see by our agenda, we are way behind on time, but it is what it is. We'll look to make up a bit of time as we covered off a number of these topics within our pre-meeting discussions. So with that, we are moving to item 4, the Māori Committee Terms of Reference and Charter, page 5. So we have had a pre-discussion. We did actually discuss these and review these towards the end of our last term. So is there any, I'll go to the officers first, is there any other information you want to relay to us other than what we can read for ourselves?
Which is probably counted at paragraph 2, and that is the council staff. You have the papers in front of you. We'll take them as read. Council staff recommends that your committee confirms and adopts the terms of reference as it is attached and agrees the process and the timeframes to enable the adoption and the signing of the charter at the 3 May 2023 meeting.
So unless there's any discussion.
I've only got one point, and I just refer back to when we reviewed the charter, myself, Api and Roger. Yeah, and then as we go through a period of change in the future with Three Waters, all that's coming, we're aware that we may have to do some changes, but I would move the current charter, and just in the future, we're aware that changes are going to impact on this current document, and we'll review that at a later stage. Ngā mihi.
Well, thank you, Peter. Māori, did I?
Look, and I've gone over to just see, you know, I mean, there's some just small touches, I think, anyway, to kind of best fit some of the definitions that are in here. And I'm trying to look for where my scribbles had put me, you know, little things that really are important. The whole notion, and I think it's really great that we represent, of course, the marae hapu base. There are some changing times and political landscape changes that are imminent upon us. And I guess that's kind of partly reflected in the way by which when the repeal of the RMA, and we're starting to see some of that take place right now, that language is still in here. Secondly, too, also, I think, too, while there's, and I say it's a real, just subtle changes when we start to talk about the mana whenua, the mana tangata, being, of course, residing with the hapu, and using terms such as tino rangatiratanga. I'd like to think that there's a more collective, you know, aspiration in terms of not only recognising and acknowledging the mana motuhake of the hapu, but also the role we serve in terms of our collective tino rangatiratanga with each other. And I think that's really important because it really demonstrates why we're here as a collective, representing our own individual roles, functions and responsibilities, and just those sorts of things. You know, it's not a major review, but just to highlight some of those sort of twinks and just to acknowledge the work that's already gone previously to bring it to this stage.
So in principle, you're happy with the direction that it moves in?
In principle.
It is it's those minor changes you'd like to see potentially incorporated?
Maybe just to kind of, you know, just ask maybe the committee, the working party or whoever that was that did go over that, just finalise that maybe alongside of some of the staff. More than happy to kind of share my thoughts in terms of where those parts are,
cool.
If that's okay.
So,
but in principle, yeah.
So just practical, to make this all practical, make it all happen.
So, like pai tō kōrero matua mare, and I'm thinking about the timing and being agile. So, James, where's James gone? He's already left. Hey. Well, the pātai is in. Given his foresight in the advantageous position he's going to be in, to give us heads up on when terms of reference should reflect these changes in a timely manner as to coincide with RMA reform. Do you know what I mean? Because there's RMA reform, it happens, and there's an implementation phase, and then when, during terms of references of committees and such, is the good trigger point to change, do you know? So I'm thinking of the timing of agility.
So one was changes here, the other was terminology.
Yeah.
So Marty's,
Right.
your one's in regards to terminology, eh?
Yes,
It's
that's
basically
correct,
about getting
yeah.
the terminology right.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find your scribbles?
Yes, I did, and it's really item introduction to he tō takatini right at the very front end, number 6. Hapu have mana whenua, mana moana, that reflects their mana motuhake. Then in brackets it makes reference to tino rangatiratanga. And all I'm saying, that's really about collective responsibility, but those words are not in there. It really puts an emphasis on why we're here in terms of representing that individual, but collectively. Strong word, so at least it implies that. And it could be just inserted.
Chair, I note that our recommendations are framed in the alternate.
Yep.
And we can either make the amendments today that are required and then push that through for seeking approval or endorsement, or we move to a working party proposition which entertains the amendments that have been proposed.
Let's keep it simple. I thought that this is the feedback time, and I was just saying, in item 6, if you could just start to just define tino rangatiratanga, brackets collective responsibility, because the way I read this is that it's putting a real, and I like it, a whole light down on the role of hapu. It's mana whenua status, but we're around the table talking about collective responsibility as well.
Can you just read that back, please?
Can you forward that? Can you pass it over?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That might be the easiest. Did you want to have a look at it?
Here it is there. Just put something near collective responsibility in amongst that time.
So that's the only one changed, Marty.
Hang on.
It's just all I'm seeing here.
Yeah. And thanks for answering, when those trigger points are coming, because in there is, of course, the role of the regional council, regional planning committee. I think that what unfolds throughout, particularly this new paradigm of how, and I know it's getting down to the nth degree, but we've got to take this on board too as well. The heat's coming on with the expectation that we'll be providing oversight in this consents notification process. I see in here that there are terms such as remuneration in terms of that being enabled. We want to help as much the council who are going to be under the strife when those consents either are going to be renewed. They're sitting in the backlog. I know for Heretaunga there's 2,500 of them, which is my eyes pouring over when your council staff planners send that stuff to me. And I'm hoping that it's an extension of what's already in here, and if that's the case, I'm quite happy to sit down, Mr. Chairman.
Just through the chair, so it's probably better that we decide exactly what the word changes are within the charter rather than leave it to our officers to define.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it's in the charter, it's at page 12 of the charter, it's paragraph 6 or clause 6. And in there, the proposal from Māori is that, it reads at the moment, hapu have mana whenua and mana moana, and the proposal is that we insert in there mana motuhake.
Yes.
And would you like in parenthesis collective responsibility?
Absolutely.
And then otherwise it reads as it is in the charter.
That's correct, yeah.
Ka pai. Thank you, Chair.
So that was the terminology. The other one was around, we understand there'll be changes coming down the pipeline at some stage. We will review at that point and make the necessary changes as and when required. Hopefully to get ahead of those changes rather than wait till they've landed, but we'll see how that plays out. Other than that, was there any other kōrero?
Probably just a partai in terms of process. Any amendments made to the terms of reference or to the charter, is there a requirement to take those back to council?
Yes.
Yeah, there is.
Oh, yes, there was just one more in terms of 43.1, and just to insert the word after that, sufficient information, that's sufficient timely information. Timely, we're getting it way ahead. 43.1, that's sufficient timely information.
Yep. Other than that, any further conversation? If not, are we happy to move? I think.
Mike, kia ora.
So we've got Baden moving, or you want to call it all Baden?
Kōrero. just to probably emphasise that the changes side of the kōrero, because the RMA is going to be moving into a new space, and I guess, what am I trying to say here? That the tai whenua, I know for Nikki is thinking about how it contributes in the new space in terms of the changes in the RMA, and that might be something that the tai whenua individually or collectively as this committee might want to have a think about, because the new regional planning committee is going to be a lot more. It's going to have a lot more oversight and a lot more responsibility than current in terms of spatial planning and a whole lot of other things, infrastructure, housing, pūtai ao, you name it. So that's all I'm trying to flag, is that there's some really important. I mean, submissions are still open for that, and each tai whenua can put their own submissions in, but we're in a very, I guess, an important phase of what the future's going to look like. So we have a charter, we have terms of reference, but you know, that could be a very different conversation in the not too near future, I would think.
Ka pai. Yep. Thank you for that, mate. Were you ready to move?
Yeah,
Peter, thank you. Move. There was no further kōrero. I'll ask Peter. So Peter's moving. Do I have a seconder?
Right.
Thank you. And Hawaii. Any further comments on it?
Just acknowledgement to the Working Party who had the foresight, and I suppose the whole council, the whole committee, Aroha Mai, had the foresight to look at these before we came to the new term, so that we're more prepared starting today, the start of the year. So tēnā koutou. Kia ora.
Ka pai. No other kōrero. Other than that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Thank you. Carried. Going to item 5, appointment of tai whenua representatives. I'll go to the officers first. Page 21.
Yep. The appointment of tai whenua representatives to the Maori Committee. The officers recommend the paper as it reads, and leaves it for this Māori committee to debate and to find those who might fill these roles, in particular tamatea and te tai whenua o te whanganui o Roti.
So we did discuss this as part of that pre-conference. Both our tai whenuas are aware of that. They are, one's meeting on Friday, tamatea, and whanganui o Roti is meeting the following Friday after that, and they will be on the agenda of both.
Yeah, no, for Whanganui Aroto, we confirmed our representation a few months ago. I thought we'd sent an email into the regional council, but we'll go through that to find that, because it was passed in a board meeting, the 3. So maybe you haven't received, or I don't see no documentation, but we'll make sure the documentation gets sent through.
Is that sufficient?
For today, it would be good if we can just confirm today who those respective rangatira are. So
we can do that verbally.
Yep.
And you want that, and then certify that later on in writing.
Yep.
So Whanganui o Rotu.
Yep. Peter, Eden, Api, Robin, and Rose Hiha.
And across the tamatea.
Still to be nominated at our first board meeting on Friday.
Ka pai, tēnā koutou. Thank you, Chair.
So we're just noting this paper, I take it?
We've got recommendations.
Your recommendation is? There's a number of...
Chair, on your behalf, that the Māori Committee receives and considers this paper, the appointment of tangata whenua representatives to the Māori Committee staff report. Recommendation 2 agrees that the decisions to be made are not significant under the criteria contained in Council's adopted significant engagement policy, and that the Māori Committee can exercise its discretion to make these without conferring with the community or persons likely to have an interest in the decision. It agrees to the membership as detailed in the terms of reference adopted 16 November 2022 and accepts the appointment of Tangan Whenua representatives being Katarina Kawana, Henare Mita, representing Wairoa Tai Whenua, Paul Kelly, representing Wairoa Kahungunu Executive, with Teresa Smith as the alternative member for the Wairoa Roia. Uncle Hami, Mare, and yourself, Chair Michael Paku, representing Tai Whenua Heretaunga Tai Whenua, with Ana Te Whaiti as the alternate member. Baden Barber, representing the Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated Board, with to be advised who that alternate member might be, unless you know that.
Well, since that hui, JB's become the chair of the Tamatea Tai Whenua, so let's see where their hui goes. We were thinking of having JB as the alternate, but let's see how their Tai Whenua hui goes first, and we'll come back to you with who our alternate will be.
Tēnā koe, Baden. So that one there, to be advised by Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated Board as to who the alternate member might be. And today we've heard that the three positions representing Te Tai Whenua Te Whanganui Arotu are seated here with us, tēnā koutou. And on Friday or very soon thereafter, we will also know who the Tamatea Tai Whenua are. Those are the recommendations, Chair.
So if there's no further speakers to the recommendations, I'll ask for a move and a seconder. Thank you, Mare. Thank you, Henare. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody wishing to abstain? Thank you. Carried. I note that we had 5 minutes on the agenda for that kaupapa. Just the recommendations alone was 5 minutes. We got there. Item 6.
Done.
Nominations for the Māori committee reps to council committees.
Again, the officers, we hope and we wish that you take the paper as read. There are some, apart from the three from previous, which is the Environment and Integrated Catchments Committee, the Corporate and Strategic Committee, the Regional Transport Committee, we have a new committee that's come through council, that's the Climate Action Joint Committee. So there are 4 that are seeking those representatives, one of them 2.
So thank you. Once again, we caucused this prior to our meeting. So as you say, there are four committees. The first one is Corporate and Strategic.
Yes.
And we're seeking a nomination there. The nomination that came from prior to our hui was Peter Eden. So are you wanting to move in a second for these now? Or you want to do it right at the end?
Can we do them all as a block?
Yep. Yes. Okay then, so moving down into transport.
Environmental and integrated.
Environmental and integrated. At this point in time, we had Katarina. Sorry, Katarina. Yeah, Katarina. Katarina, sorry.
Katarina.
Hey, Tika. Kawana. And then moving down into transport, regional transport, we had Api Robin. And then coming down into our Climate Change Action Joint Committee. So in order to make sure that we give good representation and spread of that representation, and it's not all ending up in one particular tai whenua, so what we do have is for our alternate, Māori Apatu, and for our other two members, we are looking for a representation from Tamatea and one from Wairoa. So they're spread.
Oh, yeah, kapai. Have you decided on those?
That we're leaving those for each of those tai whenua to determine for themselves who that representative is going to be. They will get back to you in due course very shortly, no doubt.
Now, we'll ask the question on Friday.
And Wairoa?
They'll go home and report.
I was ready to put my hand up, but I'm going to go and ask, I guess.
Don't forget, it has to be someone at this table. Hey, we can't bring someone in.
Yeah, I'll do.
Happy? All right, done. Wairoa's done, so. Paul. So Paul is one of those representatives on our Climate Action Committee. You dropped out, Baden. Sorry, Baden, we just lost you for a minute.
Yeah. Mena e pai ana, kua tūtaku ringa mo tērā o ngā komiti.
Ka pai.
kia ora.
Move, Baden.
Second.
Second, Peter. Any further conversation? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Ko mana. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Chair. So if we could have those names as soon as possible so they can be incorporated, endorsed from this committee going through to the regional council committees next meeting, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Ka pai, so I think we're about 15 minutes behind schedule. We look at that. Catching up.
So, I'll just interrupt just for a second here. So we'll still break for lunch at 12 o'clock, but we've asked the workshop to start a half an hour later so that you don't feel you need to be rushed.
Ka pai, thank you. So with that, we're going to item 7. So this is one of those other kaupapa that we canvassed prior to our hui. So we've all read the paper. We're all part of the presentation at the co-governance hui.
Yep.
We also know that a lot of this mahi belongs with the Regional Planning Committee. So we're trying to get information. Have they met?
Carl, 15th. Next week.
And so their decision is quite critical into the path of this particular work. So we understand our position here is to endorse, and we understand that's what it is. So with that, we'll hand over to you.
Just as we do, Chair, just to qualify our earlier discussion, whereas the paper reads that as a decision paper, what has been sought here is actually an endorsement from this committee that will go through to the 15 February RPC.
Kia ora tātou, ko Kerry Edmonds tōku ingoa. I've met most of you before. It's lovely to see you all again, reconvening here in this hui. Many of you have had the benefit of attending our All Governors hui last week and having Nicola give you a presentation on freshwater management units. However, obviously for the purpose of this committee, we do need to traverse this conversation with you all again in advance of the Regional Planning Committee next week for their decision. So Nicola will take you through the paper, but essentially what we are wanting to do today is just go back over the detail, I suppose, about what the freshwater management units are, what their purpose is, why we need to make a decision as an organisation around the delineation of the freshwater management units so that we can progress our work for the Kotahi plan.
Perfect. Morena. For those who don't already know me, I'm Nicola Nicholson, one of the team leaders in the policy team, and I've put this paper together. There have been a number of papers and workshops that have preceded this, which are laid out in the background section in this paper. But just to give you a brief run through again, and please stop me if you've got any questions as I go through. The MPSFM 2020 requires the Council to identify freshwater management units, otherwise referred to as FMUs, and these are required for the whole region, and every water body must be in FMU. The setting up of these FMUs drives two things. Firstly, the FMUs are required to each have a vision, a value, objectives and target attribute state set up. And each of these freshwater management units is therefore required to have a chapter within the Kotahi plan. So they will form a catchment chapter. Previously, things like the Tuki chapter and Tank are similar in nature. And the other role that they provide is that we are required to report freshwater accounting to central government under these freshwater management units. The freshwater management units are not the only spatial tool we have, and there's an ability to break those freshwater management units down into smaller groups, so sub-FMUs, and that can be done if there's an issue within a large area that needs targeted monitoring, targeted management responses, or just a different approach. We can also have overlays which sit over top of multiple FMUs which hold them together and group them together. We might have other spatial tools looking at things like source protection zones for freshwater, but they really are just one of many spatial tools that we have in that toolbox. It's probably worth noting that some of the sub-FMUs or overlays can be applied to manage things like Mataronga Māori monitoring, and that those opportunities for Mataronga Māori monitoring are not restricted by FMUs. So they can happen within the FMU, they can happen at place, they can happen as a sub-FMU. So there's a lot of flexibility around that. Rules also within an FMU can be applied to a smaller water body. So, for example, we talked about at the workshop last week the Parongahoan Southern Coast catchment, and we could have a series of rules that apply specifically to those really short coastal streams within the southern catchment, within that larger FMU. So they don't restrict us from having a really targeted approach where we need it. When we went out for engagement and we talked to our communities in tangata whenua, we heard that that whole of catchment approach is what they were hoping to see, and that it's really that mountain to sea journey with the water. And I think you spoke about the tuna the other day, Pauta, that if you can see that healthy connection throughout the catchment, then that is an indicator of an environment that's happy and thriving. The kind of, I guess, one of the kind of overarching principles is setting the FMUs at the largest scale possible, and then filtering down to more targeted approaches where needed. After that, we presented you the image which is included in this paper with the 6 FMUs, and that's our recommendation as staff. So happy to take any questions on any of that or provide any further information if needed.
I would just add, sorry, just to butt in beforehand, the reason for the timing of this paper, both to this committee and to the Regional Planning Committee, is that for us to be developing those chapters around the FMUs, to be setting the visions and values, we need to understand what the spatial area is for us to be able to engage with those communities, to be able to engage with tangata whenua, to set the visions and the values. We did present the Freshwater Management Unit paper some 2 years ago to the Regional Planning Committee, however it was deferred. And the reason being that they wanted us to start the conversations in the community and with tangata whenua around the values. And obviously we have been doing that very much with this All Governors group, and as well as engaging with community and tangata whenua at place. So we feel that we've been listening to what people are wanting, and as Nicola has explained, that the Kiuta Kitai approach to the freshwater management units is definitely what we have been hearing from the community makes sense to them. We understand that there are different hapu boundaries and different social constructs around how people would like to manage water. However, in terms of the actual environment, the biophysical environment, which is essentially what these catchments represent, makes sense to people at place. It makes sense to the management of fresh water, and again, going back to Pauta's kōrero from last week, the tuna doesn't stop at a hapu boundary. It goes from the sea to the mountains. You need to have that full management response to the water to be able to see those ecosystems thrive and do better.
Charles?
Yeah, kia ora kōrua. At last week's workshop, everyone talked about, the ones in our group were looking at the Mohawk catchment. And I know, like Heniuri and Peter in their groups were looking at, there are actually quite a lot of waterways in the Mohawk, and they were thinking that what wasn't evidently available is obviously the standards that we might use to gauge the health of the waters. So Yeah, and I see that was a recommendation previously that would come up with like hapu type boundaries sort of thing. But because we know that the standards are really guidelines, so once you identify there might be an issue, you're going to go into an area and look at it in detail. Does that mean is that going to be does that affect the budget of where the testing units are currently, or do we have enough testing units to cover the different configurations of waterways?
So at the moment, the 6 catchments which we are suggesting as the freshwater management units, we do have the monitoring available to undertake the accounting which is required for central government in those catchments.
Yeah, but we're looking at, when we were just talking about the Mohaka, we can see another 4 or 5 catchments in there, you know?
So we can, through the All Governors, look to certainly implement further monitoring for specific purposes. But I think that's something that we need to consider as the options, our management responses. What are the issues that we need to be addressing? What are the environmental outcomes we're seeking? And is monitoring actually going to be the right response to that? It may be, but that's something that the organisation, the All Governors, need to step through, certainly for those particular issues and what the outcomes that we're seeking to achieve.
Monitoring is really the only tool we've got as a start point.
It certainly helps us understand the state of the environment, but there isn't just necessarily the monitoring that this council undertakes. There are other ways of monitoring, so it might be citizen science, and it may be mātauranga. There may be other aspects that we need to consider, and other management responses, other tools in the toolbox that we can apply to understand what's happening in those ways.
It's all a bit of planning to do.
Beg your pardon?
Still looks like there's a bit of planning to do.
Absolutely, that's the purpose of our All Governors. We need to step through that, and these are the conversations we're going to be having at place with you as governors about, how are we going to manage these waterways, and what are the so that we can achieve the environmental outcomes that we want to.
Karen, can you get something to add to this conversation?
Oh, yes, sorry, I'm standing here like a, I won't say. So, kia ora koutou, Katrina Brunton and Hawke, Katrina Brunton, originally from Tamaki Makaurau, and with strong links to Taranaki. I can do my pipi hat another time because we don't have time. So I just wanted to pick up on your point. So there's lots of waterways in each of our catchments. The MFE monitoring that's required in terms of FMUs, how the organisation does that is says, look, and Anna can speak to this much better, and she did at the All Governors last week, was about having representative sites. So it costs in about $90,000 per monitoring site that we have for our State of the Environment monitoring sites. So for every FMU we have to have monitoring sites, and to add FMUs means more monitoring sites, which the organisation can't resource with people, but can't resource financially. And so what Anna was saying from a science perspective is that in terms of the monitoring sites, what we try to do is ensure that every type of water body is represented in a State of the Environment monitoring site. And I understand the comments but we've got lots of waterways in our catchment, and they're all grouped together in this one at FMU. Absolutely, FMU is just a monitoring tool and reporting tool to the Ministry for the Environment, but they will link incredibly closely to action plans. The action plans feed up into that kotahi plan, but what feeds into an action plan is your iwi management plans. And what we are wanting to work with you on is ensuring that your iwi management plans identify all of your why and where you want mātauranga monitoring sites in each of your why. And then what are the issues in those? And so it's feeding up. But the local and dealing with the local issues still remains with the people at place.
Good.
So,
Does that answer your question?
So, Karina, what would the difference between FMU monitoring sites and mātauranga Māori?
Correct. So, Totally, and so I would pass over to my colleague Ian, who is much more knowledgeable about this. So, do you want me to have a crack, or you want to answer in a more constructive way?
More constructive to say.
Maybe. Sorry, I'm not quite sure why we don't have microphones today, but there you go.
Yeah, sorry, we don't have much time. Kia ora tātou, Ian Maxwell, I'm a group manager of 8th Feb Kitchen Management Group, includes the science structures. So, Mike, I think your question was, what's the difference between an FMU network?
Yep.
So I think Katrina described it nicely, that the FMU network, which would be what we'd call our State of the Environment network, would be a representative network. So we would pick within the FMU a monitoring location that we could sample water quality and quantity that would then represent what we think that same water quality and quantity would look like in the balance of the catchment. So we wouldn't put one at every place. We would pick, from a biophysical perspective, the best place to then tell a story about the balance of the catchment. And it could be, depending on the size of the FMU, that we have many sites, because we might have them in sub-catchments, for example. But a Mātauranga monitoring site was really for marae and hapu to decide where and when that would exist. It wouldn't be for us to say. What we would want to do is to be obviously working really closely in a partnership to work out, well, if you're there and you're doing some work, how can we help and support that? Both what does the knowledge that we bring that might be useful for that, and then equally what in a safe way could we take from the work you're doing to tell a story about our networks as well. So what does that sort of relationship and partnership look like? But we wouldn't prescribe to Māori what the Mātauranga network looked like. We would be there to help.
Can I throw a question at you, Ian? If Māori had a Mātauranga group representation, hui, what rules would you have to monitor that we would have to adhere to, similarly to what's happening in DOC? So Māori, if we came along to DOC, they've got so many rules about everything, you actually can't do a thing. Will that happen, or will Māori get a chance to talk about what it sees, how it sees it, what it wants to me?
And so just checking in on the question, so rules in terms of what would you, permissions and things for doing sampling, for example, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, example, and we had the same thing again. When the dock ladies demonstrated what they saw in Angang, it didn't actually reflect kai, how we would see kai, what we want to do with kai, what does it do.
Yeah.
It talked about seeing fish swim around, seeing what the weeds and stuff do, and the effects that they have on things. We have when Māori turns up to monitor something, we come with a pretty broad outlook. If I'm on there, my driver is kai. And I'll listen to the other kōrero from the other monitoring group. But to arrive there and there's just a massive list of rules and regulations that you run into. And that's what I want to talk about today, is that if we aren't a part of how you design some things, that's the end result. And trying to move forward under that umbrella is huge.
So I think you've probably nicely answered the question yourself in terms of you've described how you would go about your monitoring for inanga. That's entirely for you to describe that and establish that and set that up, not for us, and we wouldn't impose rules or conditions on that. I can't speak for DOC. I'd imagine they've probably got some permissions around if you want to take samples and stuff, particularly of native species. That's not an area I'm familiar with. But we wouldn't design it for you. We would work with you to understand what the design was you wanted, and then we would want to figure out, well, how can we support and help you do that?
what's appropriate for us to do, what can only you do, what can we share respectfully and safely to both our mutual advantage.
Peter, have you got anything to add to that?
Yes, if I could. If we're looking for rules, then the overarching rule is tied into the National Policy Statement Freshwater 2020, which requires that mahinga kai, mātauranga, must be part of this. It's mandatory. And that purports and goes to what Ian is describing, that it is place-based. Come and we'll listen and talk and work with you as to what that looks like, and then we'll work with our science people as to what the complementarity of that is within the plan change moving forward.
Geez, we have to do it, just doesn't tell us how. And one of the key things I've learned working in this region over a number of years is that when we can't design one size to fit all, there is not going to be one approach. It will be very much place-based.
Mara?
Thanks for that, Ian. I was probably going to answer that for you back with Annie and Paul Polder. Just to acknowledge what I've heard this morning. You've got the ability, and I mean, this is a huge step from when we were in a workshop and we were looking one for the region. We've now got 6, and there's the provision for filtering down to target specific spaces and places. You know, we've been on a journey ourselves over the last, maybe since the Board of Inquiry decision said, we want to know what Maori is about. And so, you know, our business is really about having to create our own cultural frameworks and kaupapa. And of course, it doesn't come without having to ensure that it's got a research methodology that's been established and a framework that's processed. And you're exactly right, Ian. And as you know, we've been working in the space, and tomorrow we're going to trial this out in terms of ironing out the creases, which has been a long job over the last, 5 or 6 years with interruptions and disruptions, and notwithstanding the weather, to actually go out and test drive our framework, because it had to be, you know, building this up from the community, and it has an ability to have a national deployment strategy that can go with it. So, you know, it's about validity in terms of the cultural frameworks, folks. And I think you did make mention that there's going to be a specific focus, particularly around iwi management plans or hapu management plans. And that's why I made reference to collective responsibility, folks. You know, because when I look at the one that's in Heretaunga, we've got 3 major waterways, and they cross over 2 tai whenua, and it brings in, at times, the position, particularly around what we're going through at the moment, in terms of dissolved nitrogen, which could be a discussion way up at the top end. And of course, we're copping it down the bottom end, collective responsibility. So those conversations need to come out in terms of where we arrive together holding hands ourselves, along with the instruments and the tools that we've got in our toolbox. And so where science can complement mātauranga Māori, I'm sure that's going to be something that's going to pop up in our heads and go, wow, we're at least agreeing to something. We're working from poles apart. Look, don't beat ourselves up, because actually creating cultural frameworks and kaupapa ain't an easy thing. But you've got to take your community up and down your whole catchments for that journey. And so, you know, whānau, you know, we can either beg, steal and borrow models, the ones that exist within the science toolbox, you know, either the rivers, the CHI, all of those sorts of things. And so what is it in our mātauranga space that we're actually looking for? You know, if you can't eat it, like what Polder is saying, there's got to be something wrong. Yeah. You know, kai and wai are just inextricably connected. But there are other facets in terms of mātauranga Māori that we want to ensure that well-being measure indicators, and sometimes it's the very things that you can't see. It's the tiniest creature that could be, you know, an indicator. So I look forward to this now that I've heard your overview, because I was getting quite concerned about where's this paper going. So thank you anyway, because, you know, it is about the integrity of what you've just said today. I hope that will permeate and trickle through. It sounds as though it's got the right sound you know, cues. So, Mr. Chairman, I think, you know, so far so good. So far.
I just want to finish off. My point is, I want to get on your waka now. not somewhere down the track. Now, while you're planning it, and before you write any more papers.
You with us, Matua Paora?
Okay?
Kia ora, Peter.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just got 2 points there, and one point I brought up in All Governors because we talk about tikanga and kawa, and then we look at how and I know you've mentioned about the boundaries by physical, but for Te Whanganui Roto, when we look at our boundaries, they're more aligned up in Mohaka when we look at the Mohaka awa. And yeah, so I suppose from Te Whanganui's perspective, and I know we're in the heretanga, and we know that, and those are 2 big, huge catchments, so that's going to generate a lot of kōrero. And then talking the other day with our Wairoa whānau, because the Mohaka is obviously an important part when we look at our boundaries, so it cuts through Pahuwera, comes through other settlement entities. So yeah, I suppose, and I know we're passing in the documentation today, are we passing those boundaries, because obviously we're going to, it's overlying, and when I look at our boundary, we're more aligned up the Wairoa end than we're with the heretanga, and we know they've got a big machine in there to support them through. So just one question's on the boundaries, and then the other point someone brought up around that baseline information, just having enough measurements or tools in the kit here, so when we review this in a year or 2 years' time, we can look at the impacts we've had on the environment, the biodiversity.
Kia ora. So as I explained the other day at All Governors, and just again for the purpose of this hui, the boundaries which are set there, you're quite right, are biophysical boundaries. That does not stop us from having conversations collectively, as Mare's just talked about, collaborating up and down the waterway. We understand that tai whenua, PSGEs, the boundaries don't work within these biophysical boundaries. So we're happy to have the conversations collectively so that we are talking about the health of the waterway. The FMU, as Katrina has just explained, is really first and foremost a reporting mechanism or tool back to central government. So that's why we do need to set some boundaries. And for us, in terms of our science reporting, the biophysical boundaries do make the best sense for that reporting. But in terms of the conversations, in terms of the management approaches, we can have those conversations up and down. They don't need to be limited by the FMU boundaries. We can talk more collectively. In terms of the data, there is an enormous amount of data that we hold within the organisation, and I think what would be beneficial is that when we do come to talk at place, as we've talked about last week, is that perhaps if you do have specific questions where you think there might be gaps in the data or things that you don't know, we can at least come prepared to the table with what we have, and we can go from there. And if there are gaps, then we can perhaps look at what are the management responses to fill those gaps.
And just one other point, and it's just because we did talk in length about the Moaka plan change and how that's an example of something that appears to be working well, because it crosses into Tū Wharetoa, into Hiniuru, into Mana Ahuriri, into Mangahururu, and then it's a working model with engagement with ahu whenua trusts that live on river and have that ahi ka. So I suppose when you're looking at the modelling system for engagement, you would think that may be a blueprint if we do go into those catchments. Just for Māori, I've attended the meetings up in Tū Wharetoa, in some conversations with Hiniuru, obviously with Pahuwera, Mana Ahuriri, and some of those ahu whenua trusts, and it seems like a good model because we bring all our Māori landowners within the kōrero. So when you're looking at modelling, obviously, I suppose when we move into those other catchments, it's and it was talked about mana motaki this morning, and it's recognising those ahu whenua trusts that have huge parcels of land that we can engage with and see some same values. So you would think, hey, when we go through the modelling, that'd be a good model moving forward.
So yeah, I tend to agree. I think the Mohaka model works very well, and I think that's actually a really good representation of how an FMU, so as a biophysical catchment, you have multiple entities and groups who are working together and collaboratively. So whilst there are multiple hapu boundaries intersecting across that catchment, they have been able to collectivise and work together to work on what are the appropriate management responses for freshwater in that catchment.
Charlie?
Yep, kia ora. Just at the workshop also last week, there was someone talked about there might be room for an avenue purely for Lake Tūtira. When I was sitting there talking with Nikki Kirikiri, we pretty think, in her position, she's the Ruapani rep, that maybe there's a FMU should be formed for Waikato Moana. It's a totally different catchment. It doesn't have any farms net in it. It's purely the only leasee on the place is Doc, and
It'd be good.
which is totally different from working with farmers and having them do all their little consents and stuff. So it's a totally different catchment, totally separate. Even down to the Waikato Tāheke would probably be the only similar one to the rest, but maybe that's grounds for a separate FMU.
So this is where we can look to have sub-FMUs, so that if there is a specific management response for that particular water body, then we can have those conversations with the iwi and the community around, what are the desirable outcomes for that water body and how we're going to manage that differently if it's different to the rest of the catchment. So there is certainly opportunities to have those conversations around, for that sub-freshwater management unit, what are the responses that we need within the plan to deliver on the environmental outcomes for that?
Yeah, I'd like to register the start of that interest right now.
We'll be coming to speak with you.
Because I can see an interest for the iwi wanting to do the testing themselves.
Kia pai, yeah. Henare?
Kia ora, what I'm about to suggest, actually, I don't know if I'm going to step on a few toes, and and I hope it doesn't come across as trivial or petty, because it's got nothing to do with monitoring or regulations or collective responsibility or boundaries. Or when I read, because I wasn't at last week's forum, I have read the information. I do understand what you're trying to achieve and the option that you guys prefer. I actually agree with it, but I don't know. It's just a gut feeling when I read the name to do with the Northern Mahia, Nuhaka, and Wairoa FMU. I was wondering if because I come from Nuhaka, if I hadn't seen Nuhaka, then I would have been pretty angry. I was wondering, because it's also left out other small settlements, like Whakakē, Iwitea, Ruakaturi, Tauranga, and Waikato Moana. So I'm wondering if we could suggest choosing a more generic term like Wairoa Whānui FMU, so you don't tread on people's toes, just to consider.
Yeah. So I mean, just to clarify, the names of those FMUs have just come from what we've used for the traditional biophysical FMUs, but there's nothing to say that we can't come up with a name that's more representative or speaks to the place. And then we've also got the layering of sub-FMUs as well underneath them that can help recognise that as well.
Any white?
Kia ora. I see Baden was before me. He's got his
Any white?
Oh, kia ora. No, ka pai. I didn't actually have a pātai, Mike.
Baden? Te pātai?
Boy, I know you're saying that the FMU is about reporting back to government on the state of our waterways and using a few of those probably key waterways as an indicator for the rest of the catchment. In terms of that information because information is power, especially for our hapu and our iwi, those that are in those areas. Would that information be freely available to sit with hapu and because we've always wanted to monitor, we always want to know the state of our Maori. Mena, he Maori mate, he Maori ora rānei, you know, for our rivers. And so would that information, even though it's going to the government, be available for hapu to use in their own planning tools?
Yes, yes, it will. And I mean, all of our information is publicly available, but we can absolutely have those conversations more specifically and directly with iwi and hapu about, you know, what the reporting actually means and what it means for the health of the waterways, and develop that through, as Ian said, through support through other mechanisms and methods, whether it's mātauranga, whether it's in iwi hapu management plans. We can look to build on this in partnership so that we're actually utilising the information in a positive way.
Kia ora with that. So just coming on, summarising this so we can draw this to an end, to a close, I should say. Just in regards to, so the FMUs, there's statutory obligations that are coming down on regional council from Central.
Correct.
You've got to meet them. As part of meeting them, you'll put together what you believe will be a workable model in regards to the catchment areas and breaking them down into 6. I think what we've heard here today and at the forum of the co-governance leadership group, there's a want to see sub catchment areas employed into that as well. That involves, that will create more local input at a hapu marae whānau level. And if you like, there's the engagement. The other part I take out of this is there's been a strong desire around monitoring. And I go back to the point that was made that in regards to council and its predetermined monitoring sites and the obligation that it has to meet within those monitoring sites, there's a 90K cost to that, I'd say on an annual basis. Just, I'm guessing that was that kōrero. And there was the ability for, if you like, mātauranga Māori monitoring sites. But what I didn't hear in there was any suggestion of how that was to be funded. So that's a conversation that's still to be had, and we'll leave that on the table. Because that's important, as you can hear here, and we heard that again at the all governance. So that's an important part of this, if we want to take it forward. My final comment is in regards to the recommendations, and one of them is asking us to endorse the catchment areas in situ such as the FMUs and taking that forward to the Regional Planning Committee. Can you define for us the part that the Regional Planning Committee play in this? Because they've been engaged in this conversation for well over 2 years. We've seen it in the minutes, we've seen it in the reports, and I thank you for that, because it gives us a good background into their involvement, which has been heavy and deep. And I'm mindful of us being asked to endorse this conversation prior to it going to them, for them to, if you like, whakamana. Because as I read it, that's what's required. They are required to whakamana in order to progress this conversation further. Tika, or Kate here?
Just a comment on that, and yeah, it is tika, because the approach that we've taken with all governors for the Kotahi plan has been to, this is not just a council journey, it's not just a Māori committee journey, and it's not just an RPC journey. So all the information like we see from past discussions of RPC around freshwater management units has built us to a space, and through all governors' workshops, is around what does this look like for our rohe, the FMUs. So we've been on a bit of a journey, workshop after kōrero after meeting, and now we're at that time where we've had robust discussion, enough to understand what it means, not regarding the opportunity to have other tools such as mātauranga Māori embedded however we look going forward. So this just adds to the kōrero of robust views and perspectives, and with an endorsement, which is what is changed within the paper, from a recommendation to an endorsement that we've had this robust kōrero to move on to the next stage. But even after that, it will go to council.
Yep.
Bob.
So are we happy with that? We understand what's been asked of us here?
I suppose it just you bring up the point because it's going to the RPC.
Yeah.
But once if they're happy or they make changes or whatever, then with that, if we're recommending something here and it goes through a change, then would we not have to see potentially what that change is before, as a committee? Because what are we recommending? If it goes through a period of, a change, the document does. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah. Mare, I think you're more along the same lines.
Well, yes, and just to add to it too as well, it is preemptive in terms of trying to, garner the amount of work and the complexity that this has. Look, I mean, I hear where the desire of where this thing can land. I put to the governors, hapu by hapu, but the reality is that there's 90 plus in the whole region. I understand all of that. I'm a little bit uneasy. I mean, I would have supported the motion, but it's preemptive in terms of where the position, and if you were to take a position, yes, but it's relevant. I don't want to see that we are then, at the behest of the meeting next week where we've decided, to support this or not. Whether or not we can wait for a position because the people that are receiving or about to discuss that next week have had much more time to go into this. And I don't think it's fair when we start to load a decision because when we've got in number 2 of the recommendations that we agree to the decisions to be made are not significant, and I'm going, they are significant in my mind, under the criteria contained in the Council's adopted significant and engagement policy, well, I don't know what that entirely means. I mean, I'd prefer to kind of remove that out of the final recommendation and, of course, just say, look, it's subject to. I take the lead. I mean, there's been a tuakana in amongst this, if you can relate it in that way, because they've been endowed with that insight for a very long time, longer than us. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether or not that's answered anything other than it's uncomfortable to be preemptive.
Perhaps I could just jump in there. So the significance and engagement policy is something within our own policy frameworks of HBRC that determines when, if we need to go out to much wider consultation in terms of the community area. What this is suggesting in recommendation 2 is that your support in principle or as an endorsement or recommendation to the RPC does not breach that threshold. It can be made by this committee here. Doesn't need to go to wider community engagement across Te Matawa Maui. That's what the significance and engagement policy defines. It's an internal policy.
That was just in regards to your point you raised about the significance of this particular paper.
That's correct. Yeah.
So it's limited within this organisation. Hence the reason why it's not certificate.
Can I just qualify one other point? Yes, you may view it as preemptive, but the Regional Planning Committee has a particular role under the RMA provisions. It does make recommendations to Council. So it is right for you whether you endorse or whether you recommend in principle to the Regional Planning Committee and Hawke's Bay Regional Council your position in regard to 6 FMUs.
So based upon that, so at the moment, this is the only thing that's been put in front of us. And remembering that the Regional Planning Committee have been meeting for well over 2 years on this kaupapa. If there was anything else that they wanted to put into this, I would have thought we would have seen it come through. We haven't. Exactly. This is the only thing that has come forward to us. We also understand they have a similar view to what we've heard here this morning. We heard it at the at the Joint Governors as well. We saw that their co-chair, Tania Hopkins, was having trouble processing itself within her own head about giving her support at that hui prior to going into the upcoming meeting. The things from out of here is if we don't put anything forward, James in his new role will make the decision for us at the end of the day, because this is statutory. If we don't take the lead as a region, no doubt central government will determine for us, because the rest of the country needs to move on with with what they're doing. That's just a view that I have. I'm not seeking an answer. But what I'm saying here is we need to make a decision ourselves, for ourselves. The real guts here is us endorsing, basically what is in here in regards to the pathway forward. Prior to the actual decision maker, in regards to our two Māori statute bodies here, making that decision. If I was sitting on that other committee, I think I might be a little bit pissed if I was to pick up a paper and another committee is basically telling me you should accept this when they haven't really been engaged in it. We know what our whānau are like. We've just sorted out our relationship. That took us 3 years to get us all on the same page. That's far more important than getting our endorsement today and setting that relationship backwards. Now, a lot of work went into that behind the scenes, away from this table, away from this organisation, around strengthening that relationship. It wasn't that long ago when the Regional Planning Committee was calling for the dismissal of this committee. That's no longer the case. No, that's around relationships. That's what we talked about here this morning in regards to our poroaki with James. Those relationships, they take a lot of work, a lot of effort. And sometimes a simple thing like this can throw them off. We're not opposed to what's been put forward to us. We see that it can become a workable model if there's commitment from all parties. We get that, we understand that. We know we need to move forward. I think what we are really concerned about here is we don't get played off against our own whānau. But we don't have to. Yeah. We support where this is going. Hey, Tika?
Correct. Yes. He kupu pai, so that's just finding a comfortable kupu. Going forward.
Baden, did you have something to say?
Yeah, kia ora. I think, and I hear what you're saying, Mike, around relationships te mea. But we've all been mandated to have these discussions and to give whakaaro to the regional council to help steer where this policy goes. And for myself, I'm comfortable, even though the RPC haven't made a decision on where to go, that the Maori committee, if it feels it's had enough information and enough discussion to support or otherwise, to do exactly that, I tēnei rā. So for myself, I'm comfortable supporting it with the proviso that the kōrero that has been tabled today is part of helping to steer this kaupapa. For me, it's a the treaty relationship that our mana whenua groups, our hapu and our iwi are able to leverage off this opportunity, which I think is a really big one, to get measurement over the state of our oranga in these catchments, and that information coming back to hapu and iwi. I think that's really really important. So yeah, that's my whakaaro, Mike. We're here to make decisions. And to give some direction. And I'm comfortable to do that. Yeah.
So I think we're all comfortable with it. It's the terminology that we're using here. Are we able to change the words over lunchtime to better reflect where this committee is? And in regards to, we're supportive of the direction. We're supportive of what it is that we're trying to achieve. What we are struggling with is that you are asking us to get ahead of the decision makers in regards to their decision. We support the process. We support what's been asked of them. I take your point, Baden, in regards to we are decision makers, but I would say to you, it took 6 years to get your representation to this table. That's how much discussion needs to take place. So let's not destroy relationships just like that, because it's easy. No, let's put a bit of thought into it.
Well, and what I'm saying is that, I mean, you might be in a better position to read the relationship, but I wouldn't think that this would be a relationship breaker or short circuiter. But anyway, I could, ko koutou ngā mea kei te mōhio. So yeah, but yeah, anyway. Ka haere whakamua.
So are we able to, I'll look to our officers here.
Is that in terms of rephrasing the terminology in the recommendations?
Yes.
Just before we do that, I think apart from a couple here around the table, a couple of our rangatira around the table, everyone's been involved in this discussion around FMUs for about 18 months or so, and more recently in terms of the All of Governors discussion. I think what sits critical in this, and I know it's a council responsibility, and that is to have a plan produced by December 2024.
Yep.
And I think part of the drafting of the process is that by the end of this year, the officers would like to bring a draft plan back to you. It's rather difficult to be able to bring a draft plan back if we can't have a framework within which they can work, which is what has been proposed here around 6 FMUs. So if we were looking for a new way of perhaps phrasing the narrative of this, I guess what I'm suggesting here, and I don't believe it's preemptive, nor is it relationship breaking in regard to the Regional Planning Committee's decision or recommendations on the 15th, and that is this Māori committee endorses or recommends in principle to the Regional Planning Committee and Hawke's Bay Regional Council the adoption of 6 FMUs as highlighted in this paper. That's the suggested, Chair.
With the provision, just perhaps a bit of agreement, perhaps with the provision that catchment areas are a part of that overall.
The sub-FMUs could be determined.
That's acknowledged in the paper, Chair.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to kind of work out how detrimental this item could have sat at our next meeting. And what the lag effect of having to meet after this committee is going to meet next week, that we could have been having a different conversation if there was anything different. So it's just kind of saying, well, how do we, and I'm not into delaying, but I think it's also important that we've got a cycle and schedule of meetings that are coming up, and it's just the order of this discussion. And I've got to say that this is complex. I've been on this for a very long time, and we've made major submissions. And I mean, if I'm taking the integrity of what I've heard today, I want to see that imbued in somewhere and amongst the, the trickle down effect, to give the confidence that I'm hearing this morning. I mean, it's on film. To say, hey, we said this, there was a trickle down factor, and it's going to come down to hapu, based on some good processes. So why couldn't it have been held off for next month?
One last comment, Aroha. So since we've got into our All Governors regime and program, and now we're back in our committees, so I just want to give us some time to learn from how recommendations have come, because the kupu aren't quite right. But this is the first time we've come from All Governors to now split into our committees to then make decisions forward on the kotahi plan, right? So I think for governance and maybe Pierre's team, when recommendations come like this in regards to the kotahi plan decision making to each of our committees, that they are worded in a way that doesn't set one from the other, going back to Mike's point, which could, but I don't think in this happens. So we just have to find a better way to describe our recommendations from one committee to the other. Because I think that's where we're getting stuck. But remember, this is the first time we've had to deal with a situation.
And that's exactly right. It's not like you. I'm reasonably confident that they will get there. But what happens if they don't? What happens if they don't get there? What happens if they throw their bloody toys out of the cot? What happens if they turn around and say, oh, well, what did you fellas agree to that for? Suddenly we're going backwards.
So that's where you, me and Tanya
But some of us have already done that work. Hey, some of us
yeah.
have already done that
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Some
We
of us
can-
have put 6 years into this.
Yeah, we can find mechanisms to,
Yeah.
learn from this new
But,
program.
so let's not go backwards, then learn the lesson. Let's learn the lessons going forward. That's what I'm saying here. Surely we can find a workaround in regards to the terminology that doesn't put one committee against the other. That's all we're saying here. We agree with the direction. We agree with what you're trying to accomplish. We believe it's the best step forward. Is that not enough that you need to put us on the mat as well? That's all we're saying here. Baden?
Yeah, kia ora. I actually see us having our hui before the RPC is actually a beneficial thing for them in terms of we've had some discussion. Hate the mutuka iho, they will be making the final decision along with the regional council. So them knowing that we've had a robust discussion about this along with our all governors hui, I don't think it's a bad thing for them having to make a decision with the regional council. So, I'm and if there's a threat of it being lost in translation, well then, you'll be there, Mike, and but you can put it in the context of which we've had this kōrero, hey, so that to make sure that whatever's taken over to that hui is in the right context, because we all know what we're talking about here, and we don't want to whakaiti or try and overstep. But at the end of the day, we've had a good discussion. There's some good things to come out of this, but there's also some challenges. We need to make sure that those are all highlighted or noted, and I think we can move forward. But koe rā oku nei whakaro e te hiaman.
Ka pai, kia ora. With that, is there are we able to, while we have lunch, can we make some changes to that? Thank you. Are we happy with that? So we're supportive of it. There's no question about us not being supportive of it. We want to make a decision.
Yeah.
What we do not want to do is be pitted against our own. We're tired of it. We're tired of it. We don't need to go back there.
Don't need to be police, right?
Oh boy.
This is 2023. Get the point? All right, so we'll break for lunch.
And what time we extended?
We'll have half an hour.
Half an hour?
And we'll come back and finish off our hui.
Right,
Yep.
So what I might...
Yes, we can make it longer. 3/4 an hour? Thank you. 3/4 an hour. 3/4 an hour for lunch.
Thank you.
And we will come back and we will move something in regards to your paper.
Thank you.
But
I
support
enjoyed the
it.
discussion.
Absolutely support it.
Can I ask...
I was going to say 20 minutes for lunch.
45. Can I ask Te Rangi just to... Hei kara kia tāu.
We have one apology. Mare has had to get away. So he puts his apologies in for the rest of the afternoon. And we have apologies from Michael Harmy, who also has to get away at 2:30 to another hui. And Paul, what time do you need to go away, Paul?
I'm going to get prior to 3 o'clock, so got to pick the kids up from school.
And I've got to leave by 2:30 as well.
So since everybody has to get away, hey, manage your comments.
Yeah, we'll come back. Jeez,
Everyone. Oh, Papa Poldo and I will make the decisions then.
Leave all the decision making till after you fellas go. We'll get into it.
All right.
Bend them and.
Baden, are you back online with us? No doubt you'll get to us when you are. So just finishing off, returning back to our kaupapa prior to lunch. So it was in regards to item, what are we, 7, 8? 7. Item 7.
Kotai and all governors.
So we're still on item 7. We just need to finish off that one. So we got a bit of information, further information that will help give clarity in regards to the paper itself and the recommendations as the way they are written. I'll come over here to my left to Leanne, who will give that explanation to us.
Kia ora, and apologies for butting in. It became apparent that there was part of the conversation that I had heard in my governance, with my governance hat on, that perhaps would have been pertinent to let everybody here know, and that was that this agenda item about the FMUs was actually written, finalised after the last All Governors Hui, and one of the contributors was Ricky Ellison, who is the independent advisor to the RPC. So it was written in line with the way that the All Governors is intended to work, that those decisions come back to this committee and to the RPC, and then they feed those decisions up to the council into the final decisions, so that it's part of the process rather than against one another. It's like you would be supporting them in making the decision that they're to make.
So as well as Ricky, am I correct in thinking that Tania Hopkins also contributed to the paper?
No, but she has reviewed the paper.
She has reviewed the paper, and as part of that, she recommended it's
Oh, sorry, no, I'm looking at Katrina.
Sorry, but Ricky Ellison, as the advisor to the RPC, is as a staff member, works with us to produce papers for governors to make decisions. Governors do not review and edit papers, but I have had very in-depth conversations with Tania at last All Governors Hui about what she was expecting to see and hear represented in that paper and discussion in response to the questions that were asked 18 months ago. So I am confident in that discussion that she is aware of everything we've got in this paper and the direction that we're taking. And I'm confident, based on the comments that we've had back from Ricky and his input, that we are representing and have responded to the questions that were asked of us.
Thank you. So based upon that, there was a suggestion around the wording that would actually encompass all of that and give the outcomes that everybody's looking for. So am I being supported here in regards to what those wording is?
Yes. So the first two recommendations I would leave the same. And then for recommendation 3, I would just, and open to suggestions, endorses to the Regional Planning Committee the adoption of the 6 FMUs for the region as proposed. So that's just agreeing that we support, and In principle, I could add if that's
Yeah,
your
principle.
wish.
Yeah, I think in principle it's a good addition. Okay, are we happy with that? Given where our conversation ended just before lunch, so there's a bit more clarity given there.
It's a
Okay,
bit more clarity. The only thing I suppose I would say to that, and I sit on a PSGE, so I'm on the board, but I sit here for the Tai Whenua, and it's about retaining our mana for our marae and hapu, irrespective of whatever other group there is, some other representative. So I think we always got to remember where we come from and who we represent as in our marae hapu. So irrespective of legislative requirements for the RPC, I sit here with my own right, representing our mandated Tai Whenua. So I just need to make that clear, as we all do. So irrespective of RPC, I need to maintain that because otherwise it's pointless me being here. So I just need to say that in that context.
so in regards to those recommendations,
Well, yeah, I didn't see any change in the wording, was there?
so the first two remain the same. The second, the changes come in the wording around support.
Endorses in principle.
Endorsement.
And only to the RPC, not to the regional council. So the RPC is the step that's in between.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, no, I'll let you move that motion, Mike.
Baden, did I see your hand up, Baden?
Yeah, I'm okay with that, that recommendation, and happy to move or second.
Do I see another hand up here somewhere? So no, are we happy with the way it's been worded and a bit of explanation, has that helped any? So this paper has been prepared for and on behalf of. Okay, it has had input, no doubt, it would have had input from Tanya Hopkins as the co-chair. She would have contributed in regards to her thinking, what should be in that paper. Kapai. So can I have a second? I've got a mover up there in regards to Baden. And a seconder here from Hinari. Any further comment required? With that, all in favour, please. Anybody opposed? Anybody wishes to abstain?
Yeah, I'll get steps. I'm not sitting on the fence, but I just don't know enough, so I don't want to.
I thought that might be a better outcome for you. So with that,
I'll abstain.
two. Okay. So with that, carried.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Nicola.
So moving to item 8. Kotahi and All Governance Forum, page 131. I don't know who's delivering this.
Terry's on the way.
Terry's on her way here.
I'll step in. I can bluff my way through it, surely.
I'm sure you can.
I'm ready.
So essentially, this was, correct me if I'm wrong, Leanne, an information item for this committee for those of you who haven't been part of the formation of the All Governors Forum. 18 months ago, almost 2 years ago now, we had discussions about kotahi being our one land and resource plan that incorporates the regional planning, regional policy statement, the coastal environment plan, the land and freshwater plan, all into one. And on the basis that the National Policy Statement for Freshwater 2020 requires us to deliver a new freshwater plan we need to notify that plan by December 2024. And as you have already experienced this morning, the decisions that we need to make along the way are complicated, deeply personal to people and place, but also need to take a regional perspective. And given that our regional planning committee has the mandate for making decisions RMA related, but that the National Policy Statement for Freshwater requires input of the freshwater plan based on the principle of Te Mana o Te Wai, and one of those principles of Te Mana o Te Wai being mana whakahaere, about people and place, it was important that the tai whenua, as well as the PSGEs, are all engaged equally in the formation of kotahi and setting the values and the visions for our tile and freshwater, and being able to set attribute states for our freshwater together. And in all of that, where we got to was the need to come together rather than having separate discussions and separate committees, because it was too, as you know, you have the Māori committee meeting, you go to the RPC, you're not hearing what the RPC is saying, and then we come back to, and then you've got council. So a decision was made by our then chair, Rick Barker, to pull everybody into an all of governors forum. The idea being that we, from the grassroots, build this up together and we have open discussion, and that it is catchment-based, but that involves people in place. And then the discussions at all of governors, once we had got direction at the all governors, would then come back to the committees of Māori Committee, Regional Planning Committee, and then on to council. I think that probably explains where we're at. So for those of you who haven't been at an all governors meeting yet, we met last week and have just moved to start engagement out in catchment in place. So each of you have a catchment group that you'll be working with, the members of this table, the RPC and elected members of this council as governors in your catchment, working with our team to lead out those conversations in place. Sorry, I'm struggling because I've eaten fast and now it's coming back at me like... and so we're going to start engagement out at catchments. What does that mean? So when you come to these discussions, there's always somebody back in place that you'll need to confer with. You've got your advisors, your taiao experts, your mātauranga experts, your freshwater experts, and advisors that at marae, tai whenua, PSG. And so we want to be able to take the conversations to you so that you can involve those people at the same time and essentially speed us up somewhat and enable you to have the conversations in place with your people. So our team are about to start doing that. We're going to send out some guidance about who should be at those meetings. We have already embarked on community engagement, and we have done a round of community engagement already. At the same time, we are working with all the governors. We are working out with a technical advisory group of industry groups and other catchment collectives as well. So that's kind of the process of all of governors and the development of kotahi in about a 2-minute summary.
Okay. So for those of us that have been there, I would say that's been a fair summary of what's taken place, Tika? Yeah. So the real question is here that we are going out, we do need to go out. It's a matter of how we go about that. Could I suggest that prior to us going out there into our community, that those various catchment groups and those that are going to represent those catchment groups have a pre-hui, so each group determines how it's going to make that approach. Rather than turn up there and as members we find out how that approach is going to go.
Absolutely correct. Yep. So within this organisation, there are staff that are assigned to each catchment group, catchment leads. They will be working with you to identify how that works best in place. And I know Di is already having those conversations with staff and how they want to lead that at place. So yes, they are not, and I just need to be clear, they are not public forum. They are for you as governors and your advisors to work with staff to talk about vision, values, outcomes and attributes. If you want to have public meetings, that's different, and we can facilitate that, but that's not what this is for.
Any questions? No, because it's just an information paper. At the end of the day. We're just receiving a paper. I see from the motion that the Māori Committee receive and note the Kotahi and All Governance Forum staff report and presentation.
Yeah, I'll make that.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Rose. No further comment? Commissary, kia ora. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you, carried. I note that our next agenda item was matters arising, minor items, but we didn't call for any this morning because we've got caught up with everything else. I'm mindful that we're walking into a workshop with 2 items in that, and that we have a number of people who need to get away. So unless it was a really pressing matter that you really needed to bring to the table, can I ask that we put it up until our next hui? He te pai tērā? Aye. All good? Ka tai mai te wā, te whakakapi a tātou hui i tēnei rā. He mihi nunui ki a koutou katoa, mō koutou kōrero whakaaro, he whakaaro rangatira, he kōrero rangatira i tēnei rā. So, and also to our new members, Will, I hope you've enjoyed your first hui. Considering this is only about getting the nuts and bolts of this committee together again, as we take ourselves forward, and to our other two new members that are present today, to Henare and Paul, big mihi to you both. And of course, to our alternate who's stepped in for Māori at this point in time, ka mihi ki a koe e te tuahine. So I spoke about how Anna's second generation. So her dad sat on this committee for, 10, 12 years. I can remember him sitting on this committee. So it's interesting how the wheels turn, and we find ourselves the next and perhaps better edition of ourselves coming forward in years to come. Papa, e ka tai mai te wā te whakakapi a tātou hui I tēnei wā.
Mutu.
Ka mutu.
Gee, just for this part, please don't go away. We've got a workshop in front of us.
Baden, thank you, Baden.
Ora Baden. Papai te ki te nei hui. E tērā moko te ao, tunu koe haere ana. Te wāhi tīmata mai hoki tātou ngai tātou tiwi Maori, ngā kōrero, no Hawaii. Re ke kaha mai, mō kōrero te noho mai te tātou whānau me tō moko puna hau, o whānau tia mai ki reira. Re ngā mihi nui hoki ki te poeri nei. Kia ora Baden. Hoi no e te poari, te tātou hemana, kia koe mai, hene wai, koe hoki te hemana mo te kauni hera nei, me koe hoki e pēri, e mau tunu hoki ngā take mai tātou tiwi Māori, I hanga tīkiro ki ngā kōrero, hei te whakaheiringi hoki tātou te rānei. Hoi no me kapi nei hoki tēnei wāhanga tō tātou hui, ai ruka namo hoki tō tātou kare. Hoi ane te māngai mi ngāna hera pona te toka turutap. Whakaungia mai nei mātou kiro toki te arohanoa. A ko tai no mai hoki tātou ki te whakamutunga. O tō tātou hui, o te tīmatatanga o tēnei tau hau. Rua mana ru te kau mātaru toru. No le āpina mai hoki ma tātou whānau. A poeri me ngā kei whakaheiru te kauni hera. A ke hoki paia I rau katoho ki rātou ki o rātou kāinga maha. A hei tū te kai noho ki ngā whānau kei reira ke tarapeke ana, e mahi ana ngā mahi I tēnei wā. E te māngai mi ngāna hera pona te toka turutap. Whakaungi mai tonu mātou ki roto ki te arohanoa, pai here here ki tēnā mātou. E roto ki te rangi Māori ngā wā katoa, o koe no ki te maanga hei tautuko mai, ai nei, ake nei, ai. A ki a tau, ki a tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou are ki a ihu kreiti, a me te aro o te atua, me te whiwhingatanga te wai rua tapu, ake, 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 āmini. Kia ora rata.